Hello, dear friends, and beloved greetings from the Andalusian mountains. Today, I want to talk about humanity, who we truly are, what is our true nature. Human. Hue. Light. Light man. Being of light. That is who we are.
Sex,
음악,
music,
기술 등
technology,
모든
any
다른
kind of
종류의
revolution
혁명으로
except
바뀌어가고 있다.
the social revolution.
이 영화에서는
In this film, we will
사용자들을
reveal
대신하여
the methods
해당
used by the
인민들을
propagandists
주관하는
to control
프로파간디스트들이
populations
사용하는
on behalf of their
방법들을
owners.
부유하고 강력한 힘을 가진
Although
사용자들이
these rich and
단지
powerful
세계
owners
인구의
only make up
1%라고
1% of the world's
99%를
population,
대상으로 자신들에게
they have
필요한
mastered the use of
것들을
propaganda
구매하기 위하여
over 99% of the
더욱
world's
노동만을 해야
population,
하는 소비 노예
turning
집단으로
them into
전락시키는
consumer slaves who work
프로파간디스트들을
harder and harder
이용하는
to buy
방법을
things
너무나
they
잘
don't
알고
need.
있다고 할 수 있다. 이와
We are not a virus excreting, filthy, dirty biohazard that has to be locked down and sterilized and controlled at all times, at all costs. This is the narrative, this spell that
These consumer slaves are also made to pay taxes to their government,
침략 행위와
money which is
점령에
used to
쓰여지는
develop
무기들을
new
개발하는
weapons for the
자금이
pernicious invasions and
세금
occupations
받쳐야
of other countries.
지난 5년만 보더라도
In the last
이런
5 years
소비노예
alone,
집단은
they've
그들의
given their owners
사용자들에게
more than $1 trillion for these illegal and immoral wars
that's being cast to create this self-hatred, this crisis of our identity, to believe that just a mere fact of us walking outside and breathing can cause somebody else to die.
Is that people are good, people are, during a crisis we come together and we act collectively, and local communities have started to work together, and of course we can see that in many countries as well, but also that sometimes there is a lack of political leadership, and when that political leadership is absent, then we as citizens need to go in and take that responsibility and demand that our leaders actually take that responsibility.
This tends to be bragging about their country, and I would also like to mention one severe problem that we are still having, so that you don't get the picture that we are without problems. And that is basically a very, very high structural unemployment among youth. Our youth unemployment is running over 20% for the last 20 years. Youth immigrants are unemployed to a much higher degree. Sweden is now, in absolute terms, the country that has most immigrants in Europe. In absolute terms, we are receiving as many people as France, England, and Germany. And Sweden is around 10 million, and France and the UK and the others are among 50, 60, 70 million. Basically, the US is providing these flows for us. You make war and we get the refugees. So the largest ethnic minority in Sweden now is the Iraqis, which is the largest group. We have a very large Iranian group, a large Somali group, quite a large Afghanistani group. And we think that this is basically an asset.
물론 이와 같은 건모
Of
술수적
course,
행위는
such
무장을
Machiavellian
동반하여
activity requires a disguise,
프로파간디스트들이
which is why propagandists call themselves the public relations industry. But do not be fooled. Public relations and propaganda are interchangeable, and it is the massive public relations industry that is designed to alter perception, reshape reality, and manufacture consent.
There has never been a proof of a viral pathogenic contagion. It has not been proven. It is still just a theory. It is a story. What is a fact is that we are being poisoned. Our bodies are under attack 24/7 with the food we eat, with the air we breathe, with the water we drink, with the non-native EMF radiation that's present in all cities. This is a fact. We are being poisoned. That is a fact.
We saw how it gave her a sense of purpose.
She changed, but to me, she's now an ordinary child. She can do all the things like other people can, and she's happy.
On Friday, Time magazine's Person of the Year turns 17. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
The first question was, yes. No, I haven't gotten any concrete promises from political leaders and people in power. They just say that they are going to try their best, and they are trying, and so no concrete promises. We will continue to try to push people to move forward and to take action and to do something.
Okay, we're going to start with the
것일 뿐이다.
A Hollywood set designer was brought in to create a $200,000 backdrop for official war briefings.
오늘날 미국 하나만 봐도
Today, America alone has more public relations propagandists than reporters,
이 사실은 서구 사회
which means that nearly half of what people in the West hear, see, or read is written by professional liars.
할수 있다. 전문 거짓말장애의 이 일은
Professional liars whose job it is to keep people in front of their televisions,
잡지들을 읽도록 하며
reading gossip magazines, eating vast amounts of toxic food, and shopping, always shopping, for the latest fashions and trends.
만드는 것이다. 이것이 프로파간디스트들에게
That's the ideal for propagandists,
상황이라고 할 수 있다. 그리고
and great efforts are made in trying to achieve and maintain that ideal.
아끼지 않는다. 대중이 스스로
Anything that keeps the masses from organizing themselves and asking important questions about what their masters are really up to.
대중을 지켜내기 위한 모든 것을 포함한다. 1960년대는
The 1960s, a period of heightened awareness and rebellion against the establishment,
시기였다고 할 수 있다.
with students leading the resistance.
통제를 벗어나는 것 같이
But when the
보이면
situation seems to be getting out of hand, the establishment ordered it to be stopped, and the propagandists moved quickly to lead the young people away from dangerous protests into such fashionable protests.
We are also being poisoned spiritually with toxic things that we consume in the form of movies, music, series, news, constant reel of violence, fraud, theft, rape, mayhem. This is all that we are being fed all the time. Is anything sacred anymore?
Skarsgård, I have no idea that you guys Sweden is my understanding. Is that I would not know. You and Skarsgård, I have no idea that you guys are Swedish.
Yeah.
Yeah, when
We are.
you are.
Yeah.
I believe you.
We went to the same high school.
No.
Yeah.
Really?
And Numi Rapace, do you know who Numi Rapace?
Sure I do, yeah.
We went to the same high school too.
That's a sexy high school.
It's a pretty good little group there, yeah.
or all high schools in Sweden kind of sexy?
No.
No?
No.
Because we in America, we do have a sense of, oh, Swedish people, they're very attractive.
Yeah, no, it's that one high school.
Okay.
Yeah, it's very sexy.
Okay. Is it in Stockholm? Did you grow up in Stockholm? Okay. Now, when you hear an American politician like Donald Trump say, like, we want more people from Norway, do you think, like, what's wrong with Sweden? What are we, chop? Even I can't tell us apart.
Well, again, our dear president is misinformed. Because, like, we hate him over there. So, I mean, we hate him.
Wow.
So, I mean, if he got any Norwegians or Swedes or Scandinavians, I mean, that they would not vote for him, you know, so.
Yeah. You seem like
survivors can now speak about their experiences without shame. It's been amazing to be a part of that movement.
The moment that, you know, we got the Affordable Care Act passed, because I have relatives that, you know, can't afford health insurance. So it was really a great thing to know that if something happened to them, they get cared for.
The excitement we had when the Affordable Care Act became a law. My particular case, I have a pre-existing condition which was finally able to be cared for medically.
When Obama came out and spoke for same-sex marriage.
Him showing his support towards trans separately from LGBT, from sexuality. Just like, go Obama.
The most memorable Obama moment for me is when he said, "Eat your peas."
Eat our peas.
Which means just do it or get the most important things done first.
The CVS experience with Michelle was pretty cool. And dancing with Barack at his birthday party. And he's a good dancer. You know, he should not get any flack for that. You're a good dancer.
He's my role model, my idol, because I want to be president.
Really strange when he actually replied back, because it was like, whoa, I'm a third grader and I can actually get a response from the president. I can actually make a difference.
North Korea and the United States failed to work out differences in their working-level negotiations in Stockholm, Sweden. It was the first nuclear talk since the collapse of the February Hanoi summit between US President Donald Trump and North Korean leader Kim Jong-Un. Despite the breakdown, however, Sweden seems to have been emerging again as a mediator between Washington and Pyongyang. This week, Korea Now will look into Sweden as a mediator between North Korea and the US. Relations. Sweden established diplomatic relations with North Korea in 1973 and set up its embassy in Pyongyang in 1975 as the first of its kind among Western countries. Since then, it has been a bridge between North Korea and other countries such as the US, Canada, and Australia that have no embassy in Pyongyang.
Three nations that President Moon Jae-in will visit for his Northern Europe tour next month, Finland, Norway, and Sweden, have provided around $4.8 million of humanitarian aid to North Korea this year. According to the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, Finland provided aid worth $336,000 and Norway $432,000, while Sweden provided more than $4 million of aid. The countries made the donations through international humanitarian aid organizations. They amount to 26% of the total donations to the North this year, counted by the OCHA.
You were the keynote speaker here, but you shared some of the spotlight with a Scandinavian teenager, Greta Thunberg.
Oh, that's very nice.
Who you had said needs to work on her anger. She had some very harsh words.
I didn't
about
say anger, I said anger management.
Yes. Yeah. She had some very strong words here that the United States and other industrialized countries need to do more. Do you still feel that you're doing enough? You talk about clean
how
air.
old is she?
She's 17 now.
Oh,
yes.
that's good.
But what is your response to
She
her?
beat me out on Time Magazine.
But did you hear from other world leaders and business leaders who said that they think that she has a message that she
No, I
should
didn't
listen to?
actually. But I would have loved to have seen her speak. I did not. No, not at all. I think aspects of it are, I think that some people they put it at a level that is, unrealistic to a point you can't live your lives.
As Swedes, we're often asked, do you know ABBA? Do you know Zlatan Ibrahimovic? Now we're getting ready for a new question. Do you know Greta Thunberg? We're proud of the demonstrations that she has inspired, which gathered over 1 million young people all over the world. But one thing we must never forget in their message is the following. It is not up to their generation to solve the climate crisis. We have a climate framework for our society which will lead our efforts to cut emissions quickly and powerfully and achieve net zero emissions by 2045. But it's us, together, that must implement the Paris Agreement. Without any ifs, without any buts, without maybes, in order to keep the global temperature rise below 1.5 degrees.
Of what our children are being taught in our school system is very biased, it's not a balanced view, and this is why children are faced with, anxiety, panic attacks, and they feel that the world is coming to an end and is doomed. This should be stopped in our educational system, and Greta was a clear example of what is actually happening. And I blame the adults around her for allowing this to happen to our children. And especially in the climate change rally that they had, how much effort would these kids put into it if they had to go on a weekend? Their own time. It was great to take a day off from school. It was hyped up by the media, by everyone, and I think it's disgraceful.
Well, indeed, we've spoken to child psychologists.
Thank you. I want to dedicate this prize to those protecting the Hambach forests and to the climate activists who fight to keep the fossil fuels in the ground everywhere.
Det är vi som utgör världen. Vi alla som står här idag har samma mål, att stoppa klimatkrisen. Vi hade inte kunnat göra det här utan varandra. Och alla som står här idag är exakt lika viktiga. Och det vill vi vara tydliga med. Vi kommer inte sluta strejka. Vi kommer inte sluta störa politikerna med obekväma fakta. Vi kommer inte ge upp. Vi kommer fortsätta sitta här på Mynttorget och på många andra platser över världen varje fredag tills vi får det vi vill ha. Kom hit en eftermiddag, kom hit en timme, kom hit en minut. Det spelar ingen roll hur lång tid ni är här. Kom hit och kom tillbaka. What do we want? Climate justice! When do we want it? Now! What do we want? Climate justice! When do we want it? Now! We will change! 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 We want change! We want change! We want change! Stop! 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 Stop!
If at this point you've got no idea why we're striking, then what on earth? You must be utter idiots if you're wondering why we're striking. Look around you. Look at the climate charge. Look at the amount of CO2 in our atmosphere.
Is underway in Vienna. Organizers are urging world leaders to stick to the agreements outlined in the Paris Accord and publish new commitments by next year. It is the brainchild of former California Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger. Also in attendance is Swedish climate activist Greta Thunberg. She's inspired tens of thousands of young people around the world with her Fridays for Future school strike. Now, in her speech, she had a stark message for the audience. Have a listen.
During the last months, millions of children have been school striking for the climate, gaining lots of attention for the climate crisis. But we children are not leaders, nor are the scientists, unfortunately.
That enormous responsibility. I'm joined by my colleague, Ajit Naranjan from our environment desk. I mean, you really see it there, a call for action, as we've heard from her time and time again. How high is the hope for that action? Right.
You suffer from Asperger's syndrome, and you said once, it helped me to get focused on the climate topic. But you also said, actually, I'm very shy. And I have to admit, in private, I'm also very shy. But you stand in this center of attention. So many people came here to see you, and you are also nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. How do you cope with being in the center of attention like that?
Разочарую, но я не разделяю общих восторгов по поводу выступления Греты Тунберг. Вы знаете, то, что молодые люди, подростки, обращают внимание на острые проблемы сегодняшнего дня, в том числе на проблемы экологии, это правильно и это очень хорошо. И их, безусловно, нужно поддержать. Но когда детей и подростков кто-то использует в своих интересах, это достойно только осуждения. Ведь никто, говорите, не объяснил, что современный мир сложен, многообразен, быстро развивается. И люди в Африке, либо во многих азиатских странах хотят жить на таком же уровне достатка, как и в Швеции. А как это сделать? Заставить их использовать сегодня энергию солнца, которой в Африке достаточно? Кто-нибудь объяснил, что это стоит? Но на сегодняшний день это доступная технология для развивающихся экономик и развивающихся стран. Малодоступная. Но люди хотят там жить так же, как в Швеции, и их не остановить. Пойдите, объясните им, что они должны еще прозябать в нищете лет 20-30, и их дети будут в нищете. И объясните им. В целом, конечно, мы не можем не поддержать тех идей, которые связаны с развитием возобновляемых источников энергии. Надо только исходить.
I am so excited right now. At just 16 years old, our next guest is already changing the world. Look at her.
Humanity is now standing at a crossroads. We must now decide which path we want to take.
A teenager from Sweden called the Voice of the Planet leads a global youth movement and has been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize.
We are in the midst of the sixth mass extinction. Our house is falling apart. Our leaders need to start acting accordingly.
Her actions started with a solitary strike outside Sweden's parliament last year.
And now, look at what her movement has become.
Students and workers all around the world are flooding the streets, demanding action on climate change.
1.4 million kids across dozens of countries joined her in the streets.
But it's looking like this will be the largest climate protest in our planet's history.
Now she's taking her message to the other side of the Atlantic.
Greta Thunberg has completed her sailboat trip to attend a United Nations Global Warming Conference.
Thunberg refused to fly here because of the carbon footprint of traveling by plane.
You all come to us young people for hope. How dare you? You have stolen my dreams and my childhood with your empty words.
Greta Thunberg is taking on climate change head on, pulling no punches.
She delivered a scathing speech.
She fiercely criticized leaders for their inaction on combating climate change.
You are failing us, but the young people are starting to understand your betrayal.
By scolding the rich and powerful, she made such waves. A prominent conservative in Britain tweeted, "Freak yachting accidents do happen in August."
And now she's on the president's radar as well. Overnight, the president seeming to mock this teenage activist with a sarcastic tweet.
And if you belong to that small group of people who feel threatened by us, then we have some very bad news for you.
Greta Thunberg!
Just for one day.
First of all, thank you. I guess everyone who meets you says thank you, because what you're doing, it's the loudest voice, and it's getting so much attention, and we need this, because we haven't obviously done enough. So I want to start with thank you. And then...
driver två företag, HH2 och AB Fredrik Lundin. Intressant nog så väljer han alltså att inte använda sitt riktiga namn Rothschild Lundin, eller bara Rothschild, utan han använder bara Lundin i företagsnamnet. Det första företaget är HH2 och det verkar vara det verkar bara vara det registrerade företagsnamnet. Namnet på företaget hittar man i utdelningsadressen Söderberg och Partners AB. De är bra hemliga med tanke på att företagets omsättning är 23 miljoner. Ännu värre blir det när man finner att företaget inte ens har en adress, bara ett boxnummer. HH2 i Stockholm AB ingår i en koncern med 73 bolag. Koncernmoderbolaget är P.O. Söderberg och Partner Holding aktiebolag. Ett holdingbolag alltså. Kikar man på holdingbolagets vd så ser man ett välkänt namn. Gustav Anders Stensson Renshog. Titta noga på det efternamnet, Renshog. Det är ett mycket ovanligt namn, och om du har missat det så är det samma efternamn som den som hittade Greta Thunberg hade, Ingmar Renshog. Det är hans bror. Klimathotet, Greta Thunberg och Rothschild. De här sakerna återkommer jämt. Så här såg det ut när den planerade propagandan togs bort. Ingmar Renshog råkade hitta lilla flickebarnet kommunist 2018. Som vissa utav er kanske minns så reste Klimat-Greta med båt en gång också. När hon skulle över Atlanten till USA. Minns ni vad det stod på den båten? Just det, Edmond de Rothschild.
I'm in the shower, doing some research on Greta. Steady on now, I'm not a left-winger, I'm no paedophile. No, I was listening to someone's podcast and I suddenly realised something. She's an Antifa supporter. There's actually pictures of her parents and her wearing Antifa shirts, which suggest that she's basically a terrorist in America, or supports terrorism in America, and that she's an extreme left-wing activist. Now, she's also become the mouthpiece for climate change. And, all right, some people say to me, oh, brave man, attacking a little girl with Asperger's. All right, check it out. She's either a child who's got no place in talking about climate change, or she's a mature young person who has a place talking about it. And if that is indeed the case, then she is up for the same criticism and mugging off as anyone else would be. So which one is it? Either she's too young to be critiqued, or she is valid, she has a valid opinion, and therefore she can be open to criticism.
But you know I stay, bitches come and go, but you know I stay, get my balls licked by a Zoe Deschanel, looking like cocaine addict, razor blade to your head, conflict, I'm a contradicted shit, peeing on old people's houses is an inflict, 2003 shit, this ain't no splitting bill shit.
I spoke at the Skansa conference in Copenhagen. I'm now in Copenhagen with the organizer of Skansa, Frode Midjord. Hello, Frode.
Hey there.
Hello. So, this was a very different affair from the Stockholm conference in late March.
Mm.
So, what would you like to say about this one?
Well, obviously there was somehow information got out, leaked about the location, and a crowd of Antifa showed up and basically blocked the entrance to the venue.
How many of them were there, do you think?
Well, it's very difficult to tell. I mean,
I'd say at least 50.
Well, it was more than that, definitely. It was over 100 in total.
Right.
But we couldn't really tell because the police was obviously blocking our exit as well, so we couldn't really go out and get a proper picture of what went on. But the problem was that a couple of our speakers and a lot of our guests were unable to get into the venue. And the problem is that the police didn't really do their job.
Yes, that's how it seemed to me.
Yeah.
They could easily have just cleared the Antifa away.
They should have cleared the Antifa away.
Right.
Because the thing is that what we were doing, we were having a low-profile, discreet gathering for basically a debate seminar, intellectual debate seminar. And we kept a low profile. We didn't seek out any conflict at all, but we were attacked.
Yes.
People were attacked on.
Sandman said Phillips locked eyes with him and came within inches of his face. He said he believed that by remaining motionless, he could defuse the situation. Sandman also said a member of Phillips's group began yelling at a student. He motioned to his classmate to stop engaging. Sandman also said Phillips did not attempt to go around him and that he felt singled out. Sandman continued that he was not intentionally making faces at the protester. He said he smiled, but did this to show he was not going to become angry. He said that both he and his parents have been receiving death threats since the video went viral. Aaron Patrick O'Connor.
Very successful operatic career in order to, well, for the sake of her daughter's budding career as a climate activist, shall we say. I love this picture of Greta. Look at the determination in this young lady.
We bought an electric car 3 years ago thinking, wow, we're going to fix this. But we cannot buy electrical cars. We cannot own cars at all. If we are serious about the 1.5, we can't be driving, private cars. And no one's talking about it. But, I mean, those are the harsh facts.
And so Greta...
A while ago that people don't know that we are in this emergent situation. We all say we know and we all think we all know, but we don't. Because of course, we know something is going on. We know that the planet is warming because of greenhouse gases caused by humans. But we don't know the exact consequences of that, and we don't know the rapid changes required to stop it. And so I have met politicians and journalists that doesn't have a clue. They don't know the basic facts. They don't know what the Keeling curve is. They don't know what the albedo effect is. Just things as simple as that, they don't have a clue about.
You're what we call a 6 Sigma person. Your knowledge of the climate is 6 standard deviations out from the average. So if the average journalist does not know what you know, don't be surprised in the future. I'd like to return to one comment you made, Svante. You talked about carbon budget. There is a lot of bullshit going on out there that we still have a carbon budget. Not. We have already spent our carbon budget.
Och jag hoppas på att kunna få berätta för mina barn att det var er generation som räddade planeten. Wow.
One was saying one thing and doing the exact opposite all the time. Not least us, parents. We were two very concerned parents, very sort of interested and outspoken on human rights and care for refugees and the importance of taking good care of our fellow citizens. But in Greta's eyes, of course, we were missing out one big point, in fact, the most important point, which was the climate or the sustainability crisis going on around us. So while we were saying all these things about, taking care about our fellow man, we were flying around, eating meat and
You can speak. I can hear you.
Now, the United Nations has taken notice of Greta being here, and Secretary General Guterres asked for Greta to join him in a private meeting yesterday, and this is one of the photos. And this is one of my favorite photos of Greta. Here she was after just speaking at a rally in Helsinki, Finland, which was said to be the largest climate rally ever in Finland. Svante, can you explain to us how this all came about?
Who are you? I am the creator of a television show that gives hope and joy and inspiration to millions.
Then who am I?
You're the star.
Was nothing real?
You were real. That's what made you so good to watch. Listen to me, Truman. There's no more truth out there than there is in the world I created for you. Sing lies.
This is not who we are. If you go into nature, if you go for a walk amongst the trees and put away the news, you will very soon begin to remember who you truly are. This is what we need to focus on now. Because these powers that shouldn't be, these unlawful, illusory authorities, can only have their power because we give it to them.
Carry yourself with dignity and pride. Demand the best from yourself. The more people tell you it's not possible, that it can't be done, the more you should be absolutely determined to prove them wrong. Treat the word impossible as nothing more than motivation. Relish the opportunity to be an outsider. The more that a broken system tells you that you're wrong, the more certain you should be that you must keep pushing ahead. You must keep pushing forward. And always have the courage to be yourself. America is better when people put their faith into action. Pray to God and follow His teachings. Today, each of you begins a new chapter as well. When your story goes from here, it will be defined by your vision, your perseverance, and your grit. You will build a future where we have the courage to chase our dreams no matter what the cynics and the doubters have to say. You will have the confidence to speak the hopes in your hearts and to express the love that stirs your souls. As long as you have pride in your beliefs, courage in your convictions, and faith in God, then you will not fail. As long as America remains true to its values, loyal to its citizens, and devoted to its Creator, then our best days are yet to come.
The same deceit, but in my world, have nothing to fear. I know you better than you know yourself.
Never had a camera in my head.
You're afraid. That's why you can't leave. It's okay, Truman.
Trump does exactly what Obama did, but because he's white, we have to make it a national discussion. It's so horrendous. But Obama, he does it. Oh, let's not talk about it. A black person kills, dozens of people. Oh well, let's not talk about it. Let's not. But a white person does something. Oh, we got to make a movie about it. Anyway, so here's another thing I noticed. Like I said in my other video, yeah, black people don't want to get deep into this because it may cause them to agree with the people on the right. So really, this is a situation of agreement phobia. They have this irrational fear about aligning with the people on the right. People on the right have been criticizing mass immigration, criticizing Islam. So they know if they start, probing deeper into this and they realize, wait, the Swedish government, they're corrupt because they are like trying to hide the crimes of the migrants. They're trying to downplay it, and it seems like they're supporting it in a way by not punishing it. So they see that, but that will cause them to not only call the Swedish government corrupt for doing this, but it would cause black people to look at the fact that the Islamic community was not meant for the West, and it's not meant for it's against black people. It is. Some people say, well, that's ignorant. How could you say that? You as a black man, you're a coon for even speaking against Islam and saying things that the people saying I guess alt-right.
I know there's enormous fear and uncertainty and anger in the country. I understand. I know so many Americans are suffering the loss of a loved one, suffering economic hardship, wondering, can I feed my family tomorrow? What's going to happen? Suffering under the weight of a generation after generation after generation of hurt inflicted on people of color, on black, brown, and Native communities in particular. Like many of you, I know what it means to grieve. My losses are not the same as losses felt by so many, but I know what it feels like when you think you can't go on.
But when you lost your first tooth, you can't leave, Truman. You belong here. With me. Talk to me. Say something. Well, say something, goddammit. You're on television. You're live to the whole world.
I know what it means to have that black hole in your chest where your grief is being sucked into it. Just a few days ago marked the 5th anniversary of my son Bo's passing from cancer. And there's still moments when the pain is so great it feels no different than the day I sat in that bed as he passed away. But I also know that the best way to bear loss and pain is to turn it into that anger and anguish into purpose. And Americans know what our purpose is as a nation.
In case I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. Yeah.
We buy into their stories, their deceptions. That is how every single war has been started. That we are first ushered into their chessboard. And some of us are being assigned the white square and some the black square. And we're being told that we have to choose a side that is always against somebody else. When in fact, all of us share the same enemy. All of us humans are facing that same oppressive force.
I'm fighting the deep state. I'm fighting the swamp. And I said I was doing it, and I'm exposing the swamp. I think if it keeps going the way I'm going, and Ratcliffe is fantastic, if it keeps going the way it's going, I have a chance to break the deep state. If this were President Obama, if this were a Democrat instead of Republican, people would have been in jail for 2 years. Many people would have been in jail for 2 years already with a 50-year term, okay? 50 years. But we caught him. Now, hopefully Bill Barr is going to do something about it. And you know what? Other things are going to come out too. And a lot of other things are going to come out. But you don't even need other things. What they've done is so corrupt. They've tried to take down a duly elected president of the United States. Happens to be, in this case, me. They're spying on me. They spied on me. And that's not being paranoid. That's being fact. Now it's up to Bill Barr and Bull Durham. Hopefully, Bull Durham has got an incredible reputation. I never met him. Never talked to him. I never met him purposely. Because if I did, they'll say, oh, Trump told him what to do. Not telling anybody what to do. It's up to Bill Barr and Bull Durham. I can tell you, from my standpoint, they're guilty on so many different things. But they're really guilty. You could call it treason. You could call it, there are a lot of names for it. But it's an overthrow of our government.
You're finishing your 2-week course of hydroxychloroquine, correct?
Just finished, yeah.
Okay.
And by the way, I'm still here.
Yes,
to
you
the
are.
best of my knowledge. Here I am.
Cease transmission.
Ceasing transmission.
You want another slice?
No, I'm okay.
What else is on?
Yeah, let's see what else.
Where's the TV guy?
I'm gonna wear it. You don't know. I'm gonna be on television. I got a call and an application and...
Come on, Ma. Who's pulling your leg?
No. I'm telling you, I'm gonna be a contestant on television. I don't know when yet. They haven't told me when yet, but you'll see how proud you are when you see your mother in a red dress, television and golden shoes.
What is the big deal about being on television? Those pills you're taking will kill you before you ever get on, for Christ's sake.
Big deal? You drove up in a cab. Did you see who had the best seat? I'm somebody now, Harry. Everybody likes me. Soon, millions of people will see me and they'll all like me. I'll tell them about you, your father, how good he was to us. Remember? It's a reason to get up in the morning. It's a reason to lose weight, to fit in a red dress. It's a reason to smile. It makes tomorrow all right. What have I got, Harry? Why should I even make the bed or wash the dishes? I do them. But why should I? I'm alone. Your father's gone.
Look at this country. Y'all see all these people rioting? It's repeating. Time is repeating itself. How many times do we have to come out here and do this?
Back at the White House overnight, the anger did not fade. Much of it is directed at the president, describing these activists as anarchists and looters, and at his decision to deploy those troops.
We need the whole United States
military just to protect you. That means your days are numbered. Your days are numbered, Donald Trump.
The days of Donald Trump and police brutality.
På och så pratade lite om honom. Var ju att han var ett monster.
Ja.
Det är det som,
ja.
det var ju det som gjorde
han slog ner nästan aldrig första ronden.
Det sades ju till och med att vissa boxare liksom, även om de blev erbjudna miljoner för en match, valde att inte gå upp för de trodde de skulle bli ihjälslagna.
Ja.
Nu kommer han.
Nu kanske han kommer. Gör det. Frederick, very nice to meet you, sir.
That's it. So, nice to meet you.
Where you want me at?
Well, wherever you feel comfortable.
Yeah.
So how was the flight?
Excuse me?
How was the flight?
Flight was, I was asleep, so the flight went by smooth.
Isn't the Vegas flight very short?
Yes.
How can you fall asleep so quickly?
I was tired.
När Tyson säger att han är supertrött så kan man givetvis inte.
Yeah, as you can see, 10 cars were set on fire. There were shop fronts smashed. Police fired warning shots to disperse an angry crowd. So, hands up, is the president right to highlight problems that Sweden has had with immigration? We can speak to Ylva Johansson. She's Swedish Minister for Employment and Integration, which is interesting in itself. I've never heard of a Minister of Integration. Is that specific to Sweden?
Well, I don't know, actually.
Right, well, let me read you some of the comments that I read this morning in some of the newspapers. This is from Benjamin Duse. He's an appointed member of a local board in Rinkeby. This is the place where the riots were. And he says, the situation in Rinkeby is not good. The police don't have control over the area. If you said you had a problem with integration in Sweden, you'd be called a racist.
Well, that's not true. Of course, there are problems with integration, but you have to realize, I mean, of course, we are a society on earth. We are not paradise. People commit crimes. We have that problem. But when we compare Sweden to most other countries, we have a low level of crimes. And we have a low level of deathly violence. And we have quite a strong society, and we are quite well equipped, I should say, to handle also those challenges that we are facing.
Last year, Sweden, a country of 9.5 million people, granted residency to 150,000 immigrants in 1 year. That is an awful lot to deal with. And if you look at the polls at the moment, it's the Sweden Democrats, the anti-immigration party, that is on the rise. And it could be, they say, the biggest party by 2018. So that would suggest that a lot of people have concerns.
Well, I don't think that the racist party will be that big, and they're not rising in polls anymore. And I mean, of course, having these so many refugees in a short time, of course, that causes some problems. We have huge housing problems. We have problems with teachers, not enough teachers in school, and we have, of course, challenges to help people to learn Swedish, come into the labor market. But we cannot see a connection between crimes and immigration. We have been an immigration country for 20 years. We're taking a lot of immigrants to Sweden, and in the same time the crime level has gone down. So this is not, we can't really see that connection. But those newcomers who come to my country, they are human beings as all we who already live here, and some people commit crimes, and that's of course a problem. But most people don't commit crimes, and that's the same for us who already live here and those who are newcomers.
Minister, I wanted to put to you something that Nigel Farage...
Realiteten är nu så finns det ingen quick fix, utan det kommer att ta 10 års hårt arbete från hela samhället om vi ska få ordning på det här.
10 år?
10 år, minst 10 år. Jag kommer att bli svårt förvånad om brottsligheten har minskat om 10 år. Vi ska vara glada om den har ökat lite grann bara.
Facit efter operation Rimfrost. Dödsskjutningarna blev fler.
Ja, nu har vi kommit till Gottsunda som är vårt särskilt utsatta område här i Uppsala. Det sitter 3 kulhål i namnskylten på bostadsområdet. Det blir lite vilda västern över det hela.
Det sista som kommer lämna Uppsala för de spränger det är narkotikan. Det finns hur mycket som helst.
Då har vi massa grejer.
Operation Rimfrost är en pågående polisoperation som påbörjades i november 2019. Operationen har 4 mål relaterade till svenskt gängvåld och polisen räknar med att den kommer pågå i 6 månader. Insatsens mål är att reducera mord och sprängningar i gängmiljö, att antalet personer som ingår i kriminella nätverk ska reduceras genom användning av tvångsmedel, att öka beslag av vapen och sprängmedel och att öka allmänhetens trygghet. Operation Rimfrost startades efter en särskild nationell händelse där en 15-årig pojke sköts ihjäl i Malmö. Tidigare har en särskild nationell händelse utlyst. Det var vid terrordåden på Drottninggatan 2017. Anders Thornberg som är rikspolischef har nu meddelat att...
En timme var man uppe i den här polisbilen och vi får ju våra bilder från våra demonstranter men de upplever det extremt provokativt. För det är ju möjligt att inte ni känner att ni provocerar men de upplever det så. Och då blir det konfrontation. Hade vi varit med när den polisbilen hade varit där uppe, förstår du? Så hade vi hanterat det på ett annat sätt, va?
Bröder och systrar. Jag har ett viktigt meddelande till er. Jag vill bara säga till er att alla mina svarta bröder och systrar där ute, ni är speciell, ingen är som er. Fortsätt kriga. Vi svarta, vi ska ta över, vi ska bli nummer 1. En vacker dag, vi ska bli nummer 1, vi ska ta över de här vita. Så som de här vita tog oss som slavar, vi ska ta dem som slavar. Vi ska behandla dem ännu värre. Men just nu, vi bara kämpar igenom. Vi ska vara smarta. Vi ska vara snabbare, vi ska vara bäst på allt. Vi ska ta deras bitches, vi ska ta deras pengar. Vi ska bli helt ärligt den bästa rasen någonsin. Det här är bara början. Det börjar litet men tro mig, vi kommer växa och bli stor. Vi kommer vara den starkaste gruppen i Sverige. Ingen kommer våga jiddra med oss, jag svär på allt. Bara vänta, en vacker dag. När vita försöker jiddra med oss, då du vet vad som kommer komma fram. Vi ska visa dem hur vi gör. Vi är krigare, förstår du? Vi är afrikansk warrior. De är inte på våra nivå. Det här är bara början. Black power. Black power. Om någon vit kille eller vit tjej faktiskt snackar skit om dig, knocka dem. Om de snackar skit om din familj, skjuta dem.
Patrick Underwood of Pinole. A source confirmed with ABC7 Underwood was the federal officer shot and killed Friday night.
An assassin cowardly shot 2 Federal Protective Service contractors as they stood watch over a protest.
The shooting happened at the Federal Building off Clay Street in Oakland around 9:45. Patrick's sister, Angela Jacobs Underwood, posted this on Facebook. My brother, Dave Patrick Underwood, a federal officer, was murdered on 5/29/20 in Oakland, California, while on duty during the riots. This violence must stop. Her spokeswoman told ABC7's Dan Noyes that...
Dude, what is going on with your country?
I've made a career on that very question, which is quite fascinating. It's like nothing I've ever seen described before, really.
When I was a kid, there was the Orky Borky Swedish chef on the Muppet Show. And then was ABBA, you guys?
Yeah, that was Swedish too.
There was ABBA, there was some Lego, I think, IKEA or something. Maybe that was another place. And you didn't really hear much about Sweden. It's a small little European country. The past 2 months, Sweden has been in the news several times a day, and it gets crazier and crazier. Like, I put together some articles here. One of the ones I didn't even include, I think we talked about it last time, was this professor suggesting that we start eating ourselves to help the environment.
Yeah, that's not too surprising.
Let's go through some of them here. So I think we talked about this Swedish rapper talking about killing white people. He's a black guy. If any white guy or white girl is trying to talk shit about you, shoot them. If they talk shit about your family, shoot them. And then he gets blowback, so he adds snitches on the murder list. If someone snitches, you kill him. Are you familiar with this guy?
Yeah, he's a weird case. I've perceived him as kind of a troll, but now he's gone so far, I'm not really sure if he is a troll, because he's really doubling down hard here. Yeah. Usually.
Du har blivit utsatt av någon. Vem var det?
Ja, de där jävla trolljägarna.
Vad var det som hände?
Ja, jag satt hemma och det ringer i telefonen och jag svarade Rita. Och då säger han att han hade ett paket och undrade om han hade kommit till Rita i adressen så där vidare. Och jag sa ja. Och då skulle han återkomma om 20-25 minuter för han hade fler paket att lämna. Och tiden gick och han kom tillbaka och då undrar han ju liksom var det var och sånt där började. Ja, så sa jag kommer ner. Och gick ner. Och då står bilen där och jag säger att så stort paket väntar jag inte. Och då hoppade en kameraman och ett fruntimmer framför mig och talade om att de kom för trolljägarna. Så sa ni skojar? Men det gjorde de inte utan de ville att jag skulle förklara mig varför jag hade uttalat mig så om dessa 3 personer. Och så visade de mig ett foto på 3 stycken. Alltså det kan inte jag svara till, det vet inte jag. Det kommer inte jag ihåg, när var det? Och så sa jag till han kameraman, du kan lägga ner den här kameran och inte filma mig. Så han la ner den så sa du är dum, så jag, det tar ju mig ändå. Så jag gick och de följde efter mig. Och så ville de att jag skulle be någon Mohammed om ursäkt. Nej, sa varför ska jag det? Men vet du inte vem de är? Nej, sa jag inte, just nu vet jag inte vem de är. Ja, det var, så förklarade de vem de var. Ja, sa jag, men vad har jag sagt och så? Ja, du menar på att de kunde åka hem igen. Ja, det kan de göra. Jag har ju inte här att göra då.
Än en gång har det varit oroligheter på Kronogården i Trollhättan. Enligt polisen har det kastats så kallade bangers och skjutits raketer under kvällen. 3 personer har omhändertagits och en polis ska ha fått en flaska kastad i huvudet. Oroligheterna sammanföll med att journalisten och opinionsbildaren Joakim Lamotte rapporterade från stadsdelen på sociala medier och han uppger sig ha blivit attackerad och bestulen på sin kamera. Vi har sökt Joakim Lamotte utan framgång.
Hej och välkomna till den här livesändningen. Jag sänder direkt från Kronogården i Trollhättan med anledning av de kravallerna som varit här den senaste tiden. Under 2 dagar så har polisen blivit under 2 dagar så har polisen blivit attackerad med stenar och bangers här.
Det är inte råd att irritera folk.
Jo, det är därför han är.
Nej men lyssna nu.
Mannen. Håll käften på dig. Håll käften. Jävla horunge. Rör inte mig du också. Rör inte mig mannen. Ingen har rört till mig. Ta bort kameran din horunge. Filma inte mig. Snart. Jävla fittbora. Kan du stänga av och prata som normala människor eller?
You look at what's happening in Germany. You look at what's happening last night in Sweden. Sweden. Who would believe this? Sweden. They took in large numbers. They're having problems like they never thought possible.
The best theory for what he was talking about is a segment on Fox News from Friday night.
Perhaps no nation on earth is more committed
to accepting foreign migrants and refugees in Sweden.
Do you see the violence really spreading across Sweden into the cities?
At least 1 or 2 times a week.
It's a very political film suggesting that refugees are bringing lots of violence and threats to Sweden. So perhaps President Trump saw that segment on Friday and was referring to that being last night because that would have been Friday night.
Reporting to the police, and it's good that they report, and of course it's bad if rape is committed, but when we make service, the actual level of rapes is not high in Sweden.
Right. I realise you're not the foreign minister, but I want to ask you a question of diplomacy. How surprised were you by Donald Trump's comments over the weekend, and by the perception at least that he was picking a rather curious row with somebody who is an ally of the United States?
I was very surprised, and I think all Swedes were.
And does it anger
What did you make of it? Why do you think he did it?
Well, you must ask him. Of course, the president can say whatever he wants, but I was very surprised, and it started to make a lot of jokes here in Sweden about that speech.
Yeah, it gave rise to quite a lot on Twitter.
This is a news update from Sweden. Many of you have probably already heard what has happened, but basically a young man, 19 years of age, whole life in front of him, a man named Tommy Lind, was murdered about a week ago by a man from Sudan. And at the same night, there was a girl who was raped as well. Now, I don't know exactly what happened, so I'm not gonna go into detail, but apparently Tommy has, in whatever capacity, confronted the Sudanese man either before or after the rape. I don't know, so I won't comment about it. But what we do know is that a young girl has been raped and Tommy Lind was murdered. Now, first and foremost, I would just like to say, rest in peace, Tommy Lind. My condolences to the family as well. I will also say that, as far as I know, there was alcohol involved in the situation. And I've said this before, I'll say it again. Drunkenness needs to go. Only bad things come out of it. But this video isn't about drunkenness. This video is also a way to expose the corrupt regime of Sweden, because what you've seen now is, instead of, mourning a 19-year-old guy dying, however he died, the mainstream media and the establishment, what they are focusing on is the fact that Tommy apparently was a right-wing extremist. So his father has gotten a good few calls from all the major newspapers and minor newspapers, journalists harassing him, basically asking about his son's political views. So I repeat, so you understand, when I say that the Swedish media, the Swedish journalists are hyenas, I want you to understand that I'm telling you the truth. So you have the father of, he has just gotten his son murdered, knifed to death, bled out in a hospital. A week after, he is being harassed by journalists because they want to know about his son's political views. So there you have it. I don't find the words to describe how disgusting their behavior is, but we're working hard to replace the current regime of Sweden. That is what we're trying to do. And this just gives us more motivation when they act in such a manner. So the mainstream media and the establishment, they want to first and foremost prove that he didn't stop a rape, meaning that he didn't actively stop it when it was happening. But who knows, maybe he confronted the rapist afterwards or before. I don't know, the mainstream media doesn't know either, but for them it's extremely important that we don't have a Swedish martyr or a Swedish hero. They're only trying to make this into, right-wing extremists are using this tragedy for their own ends. And also they're not taking the side of the murdered individual. They're focusing on portraying him as a right-wing extremist, and apparently if pro-Swedish, pro-European, again, right-wing extremist, whatever that means, they're portraying him as exactly that, so it doesn't really matter if he died. Again, I don't find the words to describe how disgusting these individuals are.
are not satisfied with immigration politics. We want them to have better control. We have people that have not been allowed to stay in Sweden, that the police have no idea where they are. And we want the Swedish government to take control.
It's an onslaught not just on immigrants' rights, but on Muslim rights, on reproductive rights, on LGBT rights.
This endless war on terror, the migration crisis, all of that is distorting democratic practice in the world.
We've got enemies, open society and its enemies.
We are, as the Open Society Foundations, part of a network who support a set of values and a set of principles and a set of ideas.
This vision of an open and humane society.
A society in which everybody's full potential as a human being is realized.
A belief in the right of every individual to have certain levels of dignity, including freedom.
The freedom of expression.
The freedom of assembly and association.
The freedom of movement.
The right to protest.
Voting rights. A free judiciary.
Equal justice and transparency and fairness.
And a government that is held accountable by its people.
And at the very heart of the idea of open society is that people can disagree, but they can still recognize the greater goal of being able to live in mutual respect, in peace.
OSF provides an opportunity to question power, to hold power to account. But the complexity of the fight is that power fights back.
Even though we are faced with seemingly intractable problems, we need the courage to step into this moment, to take up this challenge. If not us, then whom?
In order to have an open society, you have to mediate the tension between equality and liberty, popular sovereignty, and individual freedom, and it's a difficult task.
The philosophy of open society is very much to work with people on the ground who have that energy, who are doing the work and know the environment where they're operating.
Local advisors, local activists, they have the agency and the authority to be change agents in their country.
We are asking people to mobilize themselves. We need to provide the tools.
Now we're seeing the individual as part of a community of thinkers, of activists, writers, journalists, artists.
We're at a moment now where people's very lives are on the line. You need healthy institutions in civil society. You need them to be well run.
It doesn't matter which country you're in, you will find a remarkable group of courageous people speaking out against violations of rights. They are the voices we seek to support.
The only thing that
ago. Arrested today. That's what justice looks like. Demands still that all 4 police implicated in George Floyd's death be charged instead of just one so far for murder.
We're tired of this shit. You cannot continue to oppress, beat down, marginalize, redline, and kill a people and think we ain't gonna stand up and eventually fight back. This is an uprising.
Rebecca Lind with her boyfriend fought back tears.
Nobody should be murdered just by the color of their own skin. And it's just so crappy that after so many years we still have to be talking about this.
But pursuing justice for Floyd is...
Here's a quote. "These thugs are dishonoring the memory of George Floyd, and I won't let that happen." Mr. Trump went on, "Any difficulty, and we will assume control. But when the looting starts, the shooting starts." The words of the president. You can see at the top that Twitter took note a short time ago. It flagged that tweet saying this. This tweet violated the Twitter rules about glorifying violence. However, Twitter has determined that it may be in the public's interest for the tweet to remain accessible. Let's talk about this with our business reporter, Hadass Gold. She joins me now live from London, of course. The president already going after Twitter for starting to label his tweets when they deem them not factual. Now they're labeling them about violence.
Yeah, Natalie, this is a much further action because the other labels we saw earlier this week meant that those tweets stayed up. You could still interact with them. They just had a fact-checking label and link to them for more information. This action, though, actually hides the tweet from most people's timelines. And if you want to view it, you have to click through. Now, this policy was enacted in June of last year, but this is the first time that Twitter is ever actually enforcing it against the President of the United States, despite the fact that many people have said that several other Trump tweets in the past year have warranted this label. So what this label means is that not only is it hidden from people's timelines, but also you can't reply to it and you can't just retweet it. If you want to retweet it, you have to add your own comment to it. This is a very decisive action, and it's one that Twitter has not taken to a lot of politicians because this new policy, they said, well, this tweet would violate its rules in other situations and would potentially just be removed because of the public interest. That is why they're keeping this up. And it's essentially Twitter just putting into actions the policies that it already has on paper. But as you noted, it's coming at a really interesting time, just one day after Trump signed that executive order that's trying to take away some of the protections that social media and internet platforms have against being sued by users. Essentially, there was a 1996 law that says that internet platforms are not liable. They're not publishers in the traditional sense. They're not liable for what other users say or do on their platforms. And what this executive order is trying to do is place more of the responsibility on the social media platforms themselves. Of course, there are going to be many roadblocks to this. There are a lot of critics about how Trump is doing this because it's essentially in retaliation to what Twitter has done earlier, and Trump has made that very clear that he thinks that these social media companies are biased against him, but also because these social media companies and internet platforms, because this action would affect all of the internet, not just social media platforms, will challenge this in court on First Amendment grounds, saying the government is trying to limit their First Amendment rights. And also, this is a law. Natalie, it would require congressional approval if they actually wanted to fundamentally change that 1996 law.
Right. The question remains, can his executive order be enforced?
Well, there are some elements of the executive order, for example, federal spending on these social media companies that, yes, they can be enforced. But will we actually see what Trump actually wants from this executive order take place? And the answer is, for most legal scholars, unlikely for that to happen. But listen, it could. There have been calls for social media regulation from both sides of the aisle for quite some time. People are looking, for example, here in Europe, where in countries like France and Germany, there are strict rules against hate speech on social media companies that places the onus on the social media companies to remove that hate speech within a specific period of time or face strict fines. But the way this is being done and the way that it's being approached makes it, I think, unlikely that there would be some sort of congressional approval. And the social media companies and the internet platforms are going to be fighting hard against this. Twitter called it reactionary and politicized. Facebook said it will restrict more speech online. And Google has actually warned that it will hurt the economy.
Hadass Gold following this for us from London. Hadass, thank you.
The violence and vandalism is being led by Antifa and other radical left-wing groups who are terrorizing the innocent, destroying jobs, hurting businesses, and burning down buildings.
Trump has vowed to label Antifa a terrorist organization, a move he lacks the legal authority to carry out. But his plan faces yet another hurdle. Antifa, short for anti-fascist, is not an organization as such. Instead, it's a leaderless movement, autonomous cells of left-wing activists who share the belief that Nazis and white supremacists have no place in public life and that their ideology must be met by direct action, using aggressive tactics like vandalism and physical confrontation. The movement draws its name from socialist organizations in the 1930s dedicated to fighting the rise of fascist parties in both Germany and the UK.
In Parkland, Florida is still very much in the news. And that's in large part thanks to the work of the students from the high school who are becoming activists now, who are planning a march that's less than a month from today that's expected to draw thousands. Now, we've seen several of these student activists, these leaders, take to the airwaves, not just right after the shooting, but again this weekend. trying to keep their cause on the forefront of everyone's minds. There are other reasons why the shooting still remains in the news as well. One of them are the excuses, these ridiculous excuses we're hearing from the police about their failures to enter the school more quickly and try to save lives. There's also a third reason why it remains in the news. Those conspiracy theories you've heard about, these sick smears that have been published on the web against some of the student survivors. These conspiracy theories are a form of pollution. Just like fake news, these kinds of ideas, they poison the media environment and they make all of us sick. It's a challenge for technology companies, a challenge for newsrooms, a challenge for politicians, and for all of us as ordinary users of the web to try to come to grips with all of these theories, these lies, these hoaxes that spread virally after a tragedy. So let's start there with David Hogg. He's a senior from Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School who survived the shooting, who was able to capture video during and after, and he's now been a subject of these attacks. And Dan Rather is also back with us here at the table. David, I have a lot I wanted to ask you, but I have to start with these terrible YouTube, Twitter, theories. If you search your name on Twitter right now, these lies about you being an actor are still at the top. How are you feeling about that?
It's great. It's great advertising, honestly. These people are doing an amazing thing in the sense that they're showing how disgusting they are. The fact that they're calling out me as a witness of this horrifying incident, saying that I'm an actor, a crisis actor, it shows how sad I feel for those people, honestly. Because they've lost faith in America, and we certainly haven't, but that's okay because we're going to outlive them.
Going to outlive them?
Absolutely.
Do you think Google, and Facebook, and Twitter should do more, though, to try to tamp down this pollution?
I mean, honestly, these people that have been attacking me on the media, not the media, these people that have been attacking me on the social media, they've been great advertisers. Ever since they started attacking me, my Twitter following is now over 250,000 people. People have continued to cover us in the media. They've done a great job of that, and for that, I honestly thank them.
I'm impressed by that reaction. I didn't know how you'd react, given that it's been a week now of these lies on the web.
They're just proving what everyone else is saying, that they're disgusting individuals that have lost faith in America.
What about keeping this movement in the spotlight? It's been 10, 11 days now since the shooting. I know you all are planning the march for March 24th. How are you all thinking about trying to keep your movement in the headlines?
I mean, honestly, those trolls online are doing a great job of it. We're really trying to stay in the headlines by reacting to what the NRA is saying, trying to point out that what Dana's trying to do, I believe she's the CEO of the NRA. She's
book rights. Boy, everyone in this country's always running around yammering about their fucking rights. I have a right, you have no right, we have a right, they don't have a right. Folks, I hate to spoil your fun, but there's no such thing as rights, okay? They're imaginary. We made them up, like the boogeyman. The Three Little Pigs, Pinocchio, Mother Goose, shit like that. Rights are an idea. They're just imaginary. They're a cute idea, cute, but that's all, cute and fictional. But if you think you do have rights, let me ask you this. Where do they come from? People say, well, they come from God. They're God-given rights. Oh, fuck, here we go again. Here we go again. The God excuse, the last refuge of a man with no answers and no argument, it came from God. Anything we can't describe must have come from God. Personally, folks, I believe that if your rights came from God, he would have given you the right to some food every day, and he would have given you the right to a roof over your head. God would have been looking out for you. God would have been looking out for you. You know?
A victim of it.
Unelected deep state operatives who defy the voters to push their own secret agendas are truly a threat to democracy itself.
For believers, the deep state is a mysterious faction of opposition bureaucrats. In Trump's case, a shadowy cabal of Obama supporters entrenched in government, intent on bringing him down. A belief firmly held by Corey Lewandowski, Trump's former campaign manager.
He had a phone conversation with Theresa May. That phone conversation transpired in Air Force One. I believe Air Force One has a secure line of communication, particularly when he's having a conversation with a world leader.
So you think leaks are evidence of the deep state?
But no less than, of course, no less than 30 minutes after hanging up that phone call, the media was reporting on the conversation that transpired. That should be an issue of national security.
Isn't it more about concern that...
That? No rights at all? Why would God give different people in different countries different numbers of different rights? Boredom? Amusement? Bad arithmetic? Do we find out at long last, after all this time, that God is weak in math skills? Doesn't sound like divine planning to me. Sounds more like human planning. Sounds more like one group trying to control another group. In other words, business as usual in America. Now, if you think you do have rights, one last assignment for you. Next time you're at the computer, get on the internet, go to Wikipedia. When you get to Wikipedia, in the search field for Wikipedia, I want you to type in Japanese Americans 1942, and you'll find out all about your precious fucking rights, okay? All right. You know about it. You know about it. Yeah. In 1942, there were 110,000 Japanese American citizens and good standing, law-abiding people who were thrown into internment camps simply because their parents were born in the wrong country. That's all they did wrong. They had no right to a lawyer, no right to a fair trial, no right to a jury of their peers, no right to due process of any kind. The only right they had, right this way, into the internment camps. Just when these American citizens needed their rights the most, their government took them away. And rights aren't rights if someone can take them away. They're privileges. That's all we've ever had in this country is a bill of temporary privileges. And if you read the news even badly, you know that every year the list gets shorter and shorter and shorter. You see how sooner or later?
It is embodied and ethereal. It is in human and non-human form. It is structurally present in the social and political dimension as the state, as false religions, as these institutions that claim to have the power over us and to rule us through coercion and violence. And it is present in the mind through false theories and toxic belief systems. This is what we're up against. We're not up against each other. We are all sisters and brothers of the same human family. So what we have to understand is that we don't have to be a part of their games any longer. Enough is enough. For eons we have been suffering. There's been war after war, threat after threat. And it doesn't have to be like that. We don't have to give in to their trauma-based mind control, their dark spell work, their witchcraft that they are broadcasting through the channels, through the media.
The ruling establishment has a lot of, they will stop at nothing to complete their toolkit of control, right? So one of the things that has been missing from the toolkit of total control has been quarantines and curfews, right? Mm-hmm. So now, welcome to the new world in America, where to get on a bus, to go through a subway station, if you think that the procedures at the TSA are onerous, right? Guess this is coming to a bus depot near you. It's a more invasive way, and the ruling class needs this because, let me say, if the ruling class ever saw wide-scale civil unrest, you'd see an Ebola outbreak in America right away.
Okay, so this is, what you see is that Ebola is
another tool in the toolbox of the ruling class to control. Yeah,
to keep down
absolutely,
repression.
Positively, 100%. This is a tool.
Right.
Congress went along, and yes, it was Osama bin Laden, and the people waved their flag and said, I hate, 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 and everything was in lockstep. Well, in 2010, they published this, Rockefeller Foundation, and here's what they're saying. They're saying that they call it a scenario. These are scenario narratives, and they speak about it in the past tense. So they put out this scenario, lockstep. A world of tighter, top-down government control and more authoritarian leadership with limited innovation and growing citizen pushback. Okay, I'll read a little bit of it. In 2012, the pandemic that the world had been anticipating for years, nobody was anticipating a pandemic.
Stop an epidemic. We're not ready for the next epidemic. Let's look at Ebola. I'm sure all of you read about it in the newspaper. Lots of tough challenges. I followed it carefully through the case analysis tools we use to track polio eradication. And as you look at what went on, the problem wasn't that there was a system that didn't work well enough. The problem was that we didn't have a system at all. In fact, there are some pretty obvious key missing pieces. We didn't have a group of epidemiologists ready to go who would have gone, seen what the disease was, see how far it had spread. The case reports came in on paper. It was very delayed before they were put online, and they were extremely inaccurate. We didn't have a medical team ready to go. We didn't have a way of preparing people. Now, Médecins Sans Frontières did a great job orchestrating volunteers, but even so, we were far slower than we should have been getting the thousands of workers into these countries.
Finally hit. Unlike 2009's H1N1, this new influenza strain originating from wild geese, they use some scenario, but this is Ebola they're talking about.
Ahead.
Even the most pandemic-prepared nations were quickly overwhelmed when the virus streaked around the world, infecting nearly 20% of the global population and killing 8 million in just 7 months, the majority of them healthy young adults. The pandemic also had a deadly effect on economies. You can see the agenda. Just naked, raw, naked control agenda written down, and it's anybody's guess how this becomes effectuated in real life. So whether this is written specifically as marching orders or whether people take it upon themselves in the intelligence networks to say, okay, well, this has been produced, so this is the plan here. But these narratives have to be written in advance because the intelligence agencies don't know how to do these narratives. They need help. So these think tanks, they come up with these like Rand Corporation, Rockefeller Foundation. These are think tanks of death. They're not the think tanks. They're not there to find great ways to help people. Right? Okay, the pandemic also had a deadly effect on economics. International mobility of both people and goods screeched to a halt. Which is what they want. They want a completely isolated world, right? Debilitating industries like tourism and breaking global supply chains. Well, of course they want tourism stopped because they're not in the tourism business. And they want you at home, in your house, in front of the TV, then they got you.
And a large epidemic would require us to have hundreds of thousands of workers. There was no one there to look at treatment approaches, no one to look at the diagnostics, no one to figure out what tools should be used. As an example, we could have taken the blood of survivors, processed it, and put that plasma back in people to protect them, but that was never tried. So there was a lot that was missing, and these things are really a global failure. The WHO is funded to monitor epidemics, but not to do these things I talked about. Now in the movies, it's quite different. There's a group of handsome epidemiologists ready to go. They move in, they save the day, but that's just pure Hollywood.
Because once you watch the TV, they own your soul. Even locally...
Wait a second, we're on television.
I mean commercial television, let's say. National. Even locally, normally bustling shops and offices sat empty for months. Okay, so I love how they talk about it in the past tense in 2010. Right? The pandemic blanketed the planet, though disproportionate numbers in Africa died. Southeast Asia and Central America, where the virus spread like wildfire.
It sounds like the opening monologue of a disaster movie, right?
Exactly. Now listen, here's the good stuff now. But even in developed countries, containment was a challenge. Now here's this one. I love this one. The United States' initial policy of strongly discouraging, in quotation marks, strongly discouraging citizens from flying proved deadly in its leniency. So they're saying, that...
No, keep going,
okay,
read it. Just
proved deadly in its leniency. So they should have been tougher, right? Accelerating the spread of the virus, not just within the United States, but across borders. However, a few countries did fare better. China in particular. The Chinese government's quick imposition and enforcement of mandatory quarantine for all citizens, as well as its instant and near hermetic sealing off of all borders, saved millions of lives, stopping the spread of virus far earlier than in other countries. So the message is here is we have to look towards the Chinese, the oppressive totalitarian. Yeah, Chinese regime as an example of what we need to be doing here. And of course, the ruling class here loves the Chinese regime because they have demonstrated to the ruling class the most efficient form of capitalism, which is authoritarian capitalism. So we have capitalism, but unfortunately we have this veil.
I get it.
We have this veil of democracy.
This is very interesting. This is continue on.
Okay.
Have you given any consideration to deleting your account, to just walking away from this platform you've been so critical of?
Well, you know, if you weren't fake, I would not even think about it. I would do that in a heartbeat.
I'm real,
but
sir.
the news is fake. The choices that Twitter makes when it chooses to suppress, edit, blacklist, shadow, ban, are editorial decisions, pure and simple. They're editorial decisions. In those moments, Twitter ceases to be a neutral public platform and they become an editor with a viewpoint. What they choose to fact check and what they choose to ignore or even promote is nothing more than a political activism group or political activism. And it's inappropriate. Today I'm signing an executive order to protect and uphold the free speech and rights of the American people. Currently, social media giants like Twitter receive an unprecedented liability shield based on the theory that they're a neutral platform. My executive order calls for new regulations under Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act to make it that social media companies that engage in censoring or any political conduct will not be able to keep their liability shield. I would do that in a heartbeat. There's nothing I'd rather do than get rid of my whole Twitter account, but I'm able to get to, I guess, 186 million people when you add up all the different accounts and add Facebook and Instagram. It's a lot of people, and that's more than the media companies have, frankly, by a lot. And so if I get a story that's wrong, I can put a social media, I don't usually use the word Twitter, I say social media, but I put something out and the next day or the next hour or the next minute, everybody's reading about it. So I'm able to refute fake news, and that's very important.
It began in healthy-looking pigs, months, perhaps years ago. A new coronavirus spread silently within herds. Gradually, farmers started getting sick. Infected people got a respiratory illness with symptoms ranging from mild flu-like signs to severe pneumonia. The sickest required intensive care. Many died. Experts agree, unless it is quickly controlled, it could lead to a severe pandemic, an outbreak that circles the globe and affects people everywhere.
The mission of the Pandemic Emergency Board is to provide recommendations to deal with the major global challenges arising in response to an unfolding pandemic. The board is comprised of highly experienced leaders from business, public health, and civil society.
We could be looking at double the number of cases in 1 week and 16 times as many in a month if we are not able to stop the spread. That would be on the order of 500,000 cases, and it would continue to rise exponentially. In 3 months, we could be approaching 10 million cases.
Okay, China's government was not the only one that took extreme measures to protect its citizens from risk and exposure. During the pandemic, national leaders around the world flexed their muscles, flexed their authority, and imposed airtight rules and restrictions. You can see the agenda.
Okay, go.
Okay. From the mandatory wearing of face masks to body temperature checks at the entries to communal spaces like
that's what's happening right now.
Yeah, but soon it's going to be like body,
It'll be at the subway?
Yeah.
Well, is that what you're saying? We'll be going through this in the subway to get on the buses and the subway?
Absolutely.
Things
positively.
like that?
And what this means, though, is, don't think about having a cigarette, a joint on you, or, basically, you can't this is a dragnet for everything. So if in order for you
in other words, just like with stop and frisk, this is ultimate stop and frisk.
This is the ultimate cavity stop and frisk, cavity search kind of thing. All right, so during the pandemic, national leaders around the world flex their authority. You know, now there's some good stuff. Listen to this. And even supermarkets, they want body checks at supermarkets, okay? So basically what they're saying is they're building a system where every move you make, you got to go through them.
You can't get food. Well, how about if you go to the farmer's market?
Right. Here's the good stuff now. I mean, it just keeps getting better.
We're at the start of what's looking like it will be a severe pandemic. And there are problems emerging that can only be solved by global business and governments working together.
We have known about CAPS-like viruses in animals and people for decades, but have not been successful at developing a licensed vaccine. And sure, there are new technologies that may help, but it's going to be difficult. I am not optimistic about having a vaccine in time to be relevant during this pandemic.
So the policy crisis in question for this board in this meeting is this: how should governments, business, and international organizations allocate and distribute pandemic antivirals and medical supplies to the people who need them most?
What we've seen work very well in the HIV field is, in fact, procurement through the Global Fund. So having a centralized mechanism, so financially able to procure on behalf of affected countries would be critical. I think
even after the pandemic faded, this more authoritarian control and oversight of citizens and their activities stuck and even intensified. That's the whole point. So they're going to get rid of...
Didn't that happen already with 9/11?
Of course.
9/11 was how many, 14 years ago, and we still have all these draconian
So
rules.
they're going to put the body cavity
USA,
searches
Patriot,
in.
and all
That's right.
stuff.
So in order to get to a supermarket, you got to have a body cavity search, and then when there's no more Ebola, well, you know what? We kind of like this way because we have a complete infrastructure of a control grid. In order to protect themselves from the spread of increasingly global problems, from pandemics and national terrorism to environmental crisis and rising poverty, leaders around the world took a firmer grip on power. Well, what the hell would rising poverty have anything to do with imposing strict citizen controls with face masks? So they're very sloppy stuff here.
These visions of despair and hatred is all we're ever fed. But I tell you something. We can stop feeding this monstrosity, because we can't fight it. The very problem of why this cycle of violence has perpetuated through eons is because we have believed in war. War can only create more war.
The second thing is it's going to be very important that for the business sector, for manufacturers of antivirals, that we have clarity around what the need is and where the need is and who are making the decisions.
I think that given that the countries most affected are those that are low and middle income countries with unequal access to technology, to finances, the UN has a worldwide footprint, universally recognized, and universal membership.
A global stockpile would certainly help ensure more rational and strategic allocation, but the reality is that we don't have the logistics capability, even within the UN, to bring that together in one place and run it. So this is where I think a collaboration between the international organizations like the World Health Organization and the private sector, which runs these supply chains for many purposes every day, understand where the supplies are, make smart decisions about how to allocate them to the people who need them in the places that need them the most, and then work with the industry to move those supplies from where they are today to where they need to be.
At first, the notion of a more controlled world gained wide acceptance and approval. I'm sorry, Nobody likes this stuff. They're just saying it. No, I have to provide analysis.
We only have 5 minutes left, so that's.
Oh my God. Okay. Citizens willingly gave up some of their sovereignty and their privacy to more paternalistic states in exchange for greater safety and stability. I mean, that's just a complete naked contradiction to the famous saying that if you think you're going to give up a little bit of security, I mean, if you're going to give up your freedom for security, you're going to get neither. That's the long-standing thing. And here what they're doing is they're not even ashamed or embarrassed to absolutely say the exact opposite. They're saying, yes, we all want to give up our privacy and sovereignty for more stability and security and stability. So you don't get that. When you give it up like that, you get the shaft. Can you show us?
They're the ones asking him the question in front of the reporters because they're pre-placed there. To funnel that kind of operation, you have to start back with people 2 weeks ahead of time and train them how to ask questions. Right. You have to train them to bird dog.
No, I'm saying we have mentally ill people that we pay to do shit. Make no mistake. Over the last 20 years, I've paid off a few homeless guys to do some crazy stuff, and I've also taken them for dinner, and I've also made sure they had a hotel and a shower, and I put them in a program. Like, I've done that, but the reality is.
Oh, thank you, Jesus. Standing in the office of the prophet of God, I execute judgment on you, COVID-19. I execute judgment on you, Satan, you destroyer, you killer. You get out, we break your power, you get off this nation. I demand judgment on you. I demand a vaccination to come immediately. Yes.
National collaboration initiatives that have been launched in response to the crisis.
È importante, infatti, mettere insieme le capacità scientifiche in modo trasparente e disinteressato per trovare vaccini e trattamenti e garantire l'accesso universale alle tecnologie essenziali che permettano ad ogni persona contagiata in ogni parte del mondo di ricevere le necessarie cure sanitarie.
In his homily,
پنجره فولاد علی ابن موسی رضاست. میلیون ها نفر اومدن اینجا دستشون زدن به این، از کورده‌ها تا بگیر شهرها، خیابونا، کشورها، قاره‌ها. شنیدم بعضی از دشمنای اهل بیت شبهه انداختن که حرم علی ابن موسی رضا ذریح و اینا مرض کرونا گرفته، ایدز گرفته، هپاتیت مسخره کرد. من اومدم ذریح امام رضا رو لیست بزنم که انشالله این مرضی تو بدن من بره و شما با خیال راحت بیاین زیارت کنید. این مرض کرونا رو من خوردم. انشالله شما بلند شی بیاین.
Just to underscore the point that cooperation among supply chain providers or businesses that have huge supply chains can add a lot of efficiency to the whole process.
The question is, can you, through this international mechanism, really promote commitments to doing this as quickly as possible and give people a sense that actually if they contribute more, that they will have a better chance of protecting their own populations and their country's security and health.
So to be completely clear, most of this production would already be committed in contracts.
Yes.
It is almost unheard of that people are producing product without having a forward commitment for the consumption of that product. So the first thing that needs to be done, because this is not something that the countries currently control, unless countries are going to bring about emergency situations and co-opt an existing supply chain.
I think it's not likely, I agree, that countries are not going to buy countermeasure to put into a global supply without retaining a large portion of it for themselves.
The cover again of
I'll
what
show
you were
the
just
cover
reading.
one more time, and then I have two more documents.
Right, this is what we were reading here, and just zoom in a little bit so folks can see it. He'll zoom in. Don't worry, you can relax.
All right.
And scenarios for the future of technology and international development.
Okay. Now I have two more documents. Keep it zoomed. We have the National Security Memorandum of December 10th, 1974. This is Henry Kissinger's brainchild. The National Security Memorandum number 200. You can look that up on your internet. I'll summarize it. He says that there's too many people. We got to get rid of the population. So to answer your question,
from earlier.
Yeah, he says he used the word depopulation, which is different. Depopulation means killing people that already exist, and it's to get the minerals, because we need the minerals. And here's another one. The CDC has a patent on Ebola. They patented it. Yeah? Right. So basically, if you want to get a cure for your Ebola,
it says it right up here, right? It says human Ebola virus species and compositions and methods thereof, and it's a patent.
It's a patent. They patented the main strain plus something like 17 other strains of it. So they own it now, and I don't know how exactly you can own that, but apparently they've done the same thing.
Yeah, I didn't think you could own a natural.
Yeah, you can. I guess the main thing to finish off this show is this, that they want to get more control, more and it's going to be curfews and quarantines. So what I'm saying is that unless the American people start to get some new way to revolt, a new way to organize, new way to protest, unless we can break through the apathy, because that's what we have here, then it's going to be a slave state here. The ruling class doesn't seem to have too much resistance. They're getting everything on their Christmas shopping list.
Public health agencies have issued travel advisories, while some countries have banned travel from the worst affected areas. As a result, the travel sector is taking a huge hit. Travel bookings are down 45%, and many flights have been canceled. A ripple effect is racing through the service sector. Governments that rely on travel and tourism as a large part of their economies are being hit particularly hard.
How should national leaders, businesses, and international organizations balance the risk of worsening disease that would be caused by the continued movement of people around the world against the risks of profound economic consequence of travel and trade bans?
We will be today terminating our relationship with the World Health Organization and redirecting those funds to other worldwide and deserving urgent global public health needs. China has total control over the World Health Organization, despite only paying $40 million per year compared to what the United States has been paying, which is approximately $450 million a year. We have detailed the reforms that it must make and engage with them directly, but they have refused to act. Several of the most significant actions we're taking pertain to deeply troubling situations unfolding in Hong Kong.
I like the way I feel. I like thinking about the red dress and the television and you and your father. Now when I get the sun, I smile.
Proved to be right.
Sir. Mr. Prime Minister, last year you criticized the president for drawing a link between immigrant crime and the recent arrivals of refugees. This week, one of our own flagship papers, the New York Times, actually profiled a link between hand grenade violence and immigrant gangs in your country. Do you stand by your criticism of the president?
First, Sweden, we have our share of domestic challenges, no doubt about that. So, and we inherited a legislation that was not sustainable, legislation on migration, which meant that in 2015, we received 163,000 refugees seeking refuge. Bear in mind, we're a country of 10 million inhabitants, so that was a lot. 70% of them came from September to December, which meant it was a dramatic increase. We changed the legislation, so now we have decreased the number of refugees entering Sweden, and we're also putting pressure on the other European Union countries to take their share of the responsibility. This is not a responsibility for 1, 2, 3, or 4 countries. It is a shared responsibility. We're working with that now within the European Union. And we of course, we also have problems with crime, organized crime in Sweden, shootings. But it's not like you have these no-go zones. We have dealt with it. I'm dealing with it every day, allocating more resources to the police, more policemen trained, more resources to the security police, tougher law on crime, tougher law on terrorism, supporting terrorism. So we do a lot to combat that. And we can also see some results now in our 3 major cities, decreased shootings, because we're attacking the organized crime very tough, and we'll keep on doing that because there is no space in Sweden for organized crime.
Det hela handlar om operation Rimfrost, den nationella operationen som nu kommer att flyttas till Uppsala. Det här meddelade polisen på en presskonferens i detta nu. Det här efter den senaste tidens våldsvåg i Uppsala. Vi ska ta och lyssna till den som är lokal områdespolischef, Ole Poljarevius från just Uppsala, och hur han kommenterar det här under pressträffen.
Mitt namn är Ole Poljarevius och jag är utsedd som regional kommenderingschef för Rimfrost i Uppsala. Jag vill instämma i det här mycket noggranna och väldigt väl utarbetade arbetet som har gjorts på NOA, där man har faktiskt kommit fram till de här slutsatserna som slutar i alternativ 3. Och jag är oerhört nöjd att Rimfrost kommer till Uppsala. Och varför är jag det? Jo, det är framförallt 3 aspekter. Den första aspekten är ju oerhört viktig för Uppsalas poliser framförallt. Det är en resursförstärkning som kan tyckas banal och poliser skriker efter resurser och vad kommer det att ge. Men det handlar mycket om arbetsmiljö och det handlar mycket om den utsatthet som poliser utsätts för i det här mycket svåra arbetet.
Realiteten är nu så finns det ingen quick fix, utan det kommer att ta 10 års hårt arbete från hela samhället om vi ska få ordning på det här.
10 år?
10 år, minst 10 år. Jag kommer att bli svårt förvånad om brottsligheten har minskat om 10 år. Vi ska vara glada om den har ökat lite grann bara.
Facit efter operation Rimfrost. Dödsskjutningarna blev fler.
On the subject of relationships, one of the elements between Russia and the United States today, and indeed Russia and Europe today, is the allegation that Russia interfered in elections. Mr. Putin, this week you told a French newspaper that Russia is being accused of interfering with the U.S. election by people who lost that election, who don't want to admit defeat. But all 17 of the United States intelligence agencies have concluded that the Russians did interfere with our election, and these are nonpartisan career professionals, Republicans and Democrats alike on Capitol Hill, including President Trump's supporters, and some are your defenders, who have seen the classified intelligence report, have all accepted this conclusion. And even private, nonpartisan security firms say the same, that Russia interfered with the U.S. election. Are they all wrong?
Have you read those reports?
I read the unclassified version.
Even in those reports, there is no specific evidence, no facts, just assumptions, allegations, and conclusions based on the allegations, nothing more. You know, if there is something specific, concrete, we could discuss that. Like in one of the entities I previously used to work for, they said we need all the evidence, addresses, all the names and the surnames. Provide all that to us. With respect to independent sources, there are no independent sources in this world. And, you know, the recent appointments with your special services point to the fact that there are any likings, any attitudes. So I believe that we should stop this idle prattle, which is harmful. And I believe this is like transferring the internal political bickering of the United States beyond the borders of the country, outside, on the international stage, trying to resolve political matters with the help of the foreign policy tools and international affairs, and that is detrimental to international affairs and the global economy and the issues of global security and fight against terror, which is detrimental.
gives you the right to say that? I mean, maybe that's how women want their relationships, those women. I mean, you're making these vast generalizations.
I'm a clinical psychologist.
And I say, hey, what a wonderful kind of day. You're saying that we should organize our societies along the lines of the lobsters.
And
so
that
you're
you can
saying,
rely on.
but you're saying there's a
bad.
crisis of masculinity. I mean, what do you do about it? You're saying you've done your research, and
So
you're
if you
saying
want
women
domination-
want to dominate. Is that what you're saying? Right? You're just saying that's the way it is. You're saying
I'm
it's
saying
a fact
there are
of life.
multiple reasons for it.
Why should your right to freedom of speech trump a trans person's right not to be offended? Right. You're saying it makes them miserable. Right, so you're saying that makes You're saying, but I want to put to you that here in the UK, for example, let's take that as an example, the gender pay gap stands at just over 9%.
The truth is still the truth, and I will do everything I can to expose it in whatever form and shape it takes. So this video I'm going to show you now is like a TED Talk presentation some months after this alleged drug attack. And we have this very same Ole Dammegård walking around doing a very professional presentation. The name of his presentation is The Drill That Became Reality. And in it, what he's talking about is what happened on that exact date when this whole thing happened. And among other things, what he's saying is that at 2:52 p.m., that's 14:52 in European way of showing times, he sent out an email, a mass email to all the key people in the different authorities, raising the terror threat level 1 minute before the actual attack happened, which was 2:53 or 14:53. He then continues explaining the whole thing that they continued doing in great details, very proud, showing slides and everything about how they spent the first hour after this alleged attack. At this point, the driver had not been caught. It could have been a normal accident. It could have been a truck driver with a heart attack, an epileptic seizure, whatever. It could have been anything else than a terror attack. But here, right away, the terror threat level was out there. It was labeled a terror threat, and they started doing everything they could to shut the whole thing down. They shut down the subway, the train stations. They put people behind lock in all the shops. They emptied the street, locked everybody down. The Minister of Defense was shut down. Certain parts of the government were shut down. Turns out that most of the police that normally works at the Norrmalms police district, which is central Stockholm, the key district when it comes to police activities in Sweden, as far as I've been informed by insiders, everybody was doing something else that day. So the people running around in police officers' uniforms, not the police that should normally be there. And in my presentation, I'm showing you that more or less all of them were not the real thing. That means that everything that has followed in the wake of this event is fake, including the eyewitnesses and so on. Once again, not easy to say, not easy to point accusing fingers like this at Mr. Slettenmark. I'm not comfortable doing these things, yet it has to be done. And if you want to see what a real terrorist looks like, Mr. Slettenmark is one of them. Not on a top level, absolutely not. He's working on a lower level, more on a street level, but absolutely an active actor in the whole scenario. So this made me...
Ja, en autistisk 16-17-årig brud liksom. Kanske inte den som är liksom främst skickad att uttala sig i virologiska sammanhang. Nej. Alltså det klarar fan många av att förstå att nej, så är det ju inte.
Ja. Och hela den där grejen, liksom, varför pratar hon alla om krigsindustrin? Om det är miljöproblem. Liksom.
Ja, krig är ju hyfsat miljöfarliga eller så dåliga för miljön. Ja. Men det kommer ju aldrig upp liksom. Nej, här hemma är det väl så att säga lite grann att man talar ju inte om djupa staten. Det finns ju fortfarande inte som begrepp av någon anledning då. Och sen så kan man ju säga att man kritiserar ju inte Investor. Och det är väl det mest signifikativa för så att säga, alternativmedia i Sverige. Det är att man kritiserar inte den delen alltså. Det är liksom, där går gränsen.
Jag förklarar precis för dig vad det är som gäller. Och om inte du har möjlighet att ta till dig det och acceptera det, så får jag be att du ringer till...
Cecilia, det du ber mig att acceptera är helt enkelt att jag får finna mig som slav i ett system där mina pengar är låsta hos er, jag kan inte få ut dem, du har rätt att öppna upp mitt konto för tredje part. Alltså jag är inget annat än en dum liten jävla slav som inte har någon makt över mitt liv eller över min ekonomi eller någonting sånt, för att ni har kontrollen över allting och ni bestämmer och ni vill inte lämna ut mina pengar när jag ger er ett uppdrag om det. Är det det jag ska acceptera?
Du ska acceptera att kontanter får du inte idag. Vill du göra en överföring?
Okej, kan vi få dem imorgon bitti klockan 9 då? Ger det dig mer tid att få dem till imorgon bitti klockan 9?
Nej.
Okej, imorgon bitti klockan 3 på eftermiddagen då?
Imorgon bitti klockan 3 på eftermiddagen.
Du får slå en signal till min chef och prata vidare i den frågan.
Men varför ska jag dra samma historia för ytterligare en när jag redan pratar med dig? Du är bankchef på kontoret där jag har mitt konto. Jag vill ha ut mina pengar, så enkelt är det. Du måste kunna lösa på något sätt.
Det du kan göra i så fall är överföring till konto. Via internetbanken så kan du göra överföringar till andra konton. Och det är det som är mitt råd i så fall.
Ska jag gå till automaten och ta ut dem några tusen i taget då?
Vill du gå vidare i den här frågan så får du vända dig till Niklas och då ska du få anställning.
How did you get that result?
That was a report that was issued in the last 6 months.
Okay, as I said earlier, the war is not traditional war. It's not about capturing land and gaining land. It's about winning the hearts and minds of the Syrians. We cannot win the heart of minds of the Syrians while we are killing Syrians. We cannot sustain 4 years in that position as a government and me as president, while the rest of the world, most of the world, the great powers and regional power are against me and my people against me. That's impossible. I mean, this logic has no leg to stand on. So this is not realistic, and this is against our interest as government is to kill the people. What do we get? What's the benefit of killing the people?
Well, I mean, the argument is that there are weapons of war that have been used that most people look down on with great. One is chlorine gas. They believe it has been used here. They said there is evidence of that, and they would like to have the right to inspect to see where it's coming from. Mm-hmm. As you know, barrel bombs have been used, mm-hmm. and they come from helicopters. And the only people who have helicopters is the Syrian army. And so those two acts of war, which the society looks down on as
let me fully answer this.
Barbaric acts.
It's very important. This is part of the malicious propaganda against Syria. First of all, the chlorine gas is not military gas. You can buy it anywhere. And
but it can be weaponized.
No, because it's not very effective. It's not used as military gas. That's very self-evident. Traditional armament is more important than chlorine. And if it was very effective, the terrorists would have used this on a larger scale. Because it's not effective, it's not used very much.
Then why not let somebody come in and inspect it, see whether it's been used or not? You'd be happy for that?
Of course. We always ask a delegation, impartial delegation, to come and investigate. But I mean, logically and realistically, it cannot be used as a military. This is part of the propaganda because, as you know, in the media, when it bleeds, it leads. And they always look for something that bleeds, which is the chlorine gas and the barrel bomb.
Assad also told Charlie he is, quote, open to a dialogue with the U.S., but isn't hearing anything from Washington. Secretary of State John Kerry raised the possibility of talks this month during his interview with Margaret Brennan.
paradigm of absolute control. And that's why we're just out here doing simple things, pointing out that we're meant to be in nature and be natural. And this is where we find the source that God made to transcend the New World Order. And that's why they want to try to keep us out of it.
I'm angry. I've had enough of these people. They're a bunch of Christian murderers scum. They're on giant death factories keeping babies alive. They're selling their body parts. What more do you need to know about these people? I go out and face these scum. They literally crawl out from under rocks. They have green looking skin and they run around screaming, we love Satan, we wanna eat babies. I have them on video. Hillary's in the creepy weird sick stuff, man. She sleeps in the same room with that creepy weird woman whose mother wears a hood over her head. That woman number one is ugly. Imagine how bad she smells, man. I'm told her and Obama just stink. Obama and Hillary both smell like sulfur. Literal vampire pot and the goblins are hobbling round coming after us. My spirit gets close to that evil and I feel it go. We're such self-centered crap. We don't even notice hell itself rising up against us. Millions upon it, people of the very worst type, and I'm so pissed. We're gonna stab your daughter at the mall. We're gonna stab your wife, your son. We're gonna stab you with a butcher knife, and then the police chief is gonna say, we love our Somalis, we love our Muslims. Oh, they're so good, oh, they're so sweet.
I was watching Fox News as I worked out this morning.
Our approach, protecting the elderly and the elderly homes was just one of them. That approach did not work very well. We are all aware of that. We are not trying to improve that approach as much as possible in collaboration with the people running and are responsible for these homes.
Sweden's coronavirus strategy is about recommending social distancing rather than ordering a complete lockdown. Now, some medical experts here claim, though, that that has been a dangerous strategy.
We have one of the highest death rates in the world, which is sad. I would say that 2/3 or something like that, even more, maybe even more, wouldn't have to have died.
So far we have managed with one of our goals, and that is to flatten the curve of the virus spread and also making it possible for the healthcare system to cope in this very strong challenge. But for every person who has died of this terrible pandemic, it's of course of a great sorrow and pain for all the families. And we will of course try to see why did the virus spread in the elderly care.
They think that the strategy that they're using is really good and that it's working. But if it's good, how come so many are dying?
Doctor of Epidemiology, and joins me now from Uppsala, Sweden. Thank you again to talk with us about the 55 million students in the US homeschooling right now. Most of the world is doing that, but not Sweden. What is the logic behind that? Because these kids are carrying, or can potentially carry, coronavirus.
Yeah. Well, there aren't really hard evidence showing that it's an effective measure to close down the schools. We have evidence from influenza showing that it is an effective measurement. For instance, studies from the Spanish flu. But that was a totally different time and another totally different virus as well. So this COVID-19, what we know is that it doesn't really hit children as hard. It's most dangerous for the elderly. So the strategy in Sweden is to isolate the elderly and to avoid contact with grandchildren, for instance, but to let the children live as a normal life as possible.
But in some instances, those older people you would be isolating would be their parents. And the problem with that is then who looks after the kids? They're going to school, you've isolated the older people. Surely it's more of a problem because those kids are then touching various surfaces, coughing and sneezing and coming home.
Yeah. Well, the strategy in Sweden isn't really to stop the virus from spreading. Instead, it's to slow down the process and also isolating the risk groups, such as the elderly. But still, we want the spread to be slow because we want the healthcare system to be able to manage this. The problem is if everybody gets ill at the same time, this will not be, people won't be able to get healthcare. So I think the strategies are different in different types of countries, and also in Sweden, it's not as common as in other countries to live within in large families. So it's more easy to isolate the elderly here compared to other countries where children might be living with their grandparents.
We're certainly all learning as we go along with this, and once this is all over, in hindsight, we can look back and see what works and what doesn't. Emma Franz, thank you so much for joining us. We do appreciate it. And thank you for your company.
How old was she, your mother?
81.
81. She was in a care home.
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely. And the circumstance about my mother's death is the palliative care.
Yeah.
Is the correct?
Yeah.
The doctor never told me that my mother
Was care planned.
Yes, palliative care. That's very strange because
it is.
I'm a doctor.
So you told me that he care planned her when she got COVID-19 and then injected her with morphine. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
But they never test for COVID-19.
But she had a high fever, so it was suspicious of COVID-19 infection.
Yes, they had visir, vad heter det? Skyddsutrustningen. Allt låg ju inne på hennes rum.
They had all the protective equipment to protect themselves against COVID-19, but she didn't get a diagnosis, and she was refused hospital care and oxygen, and then she was injected with morphine, and then what happened then?
She died.
The next day, yeah.
Yes, the next day.
Old people who has suffocated to death, who could have survived easily with ordinary oxygen, just just a mask, just up your nostrils, simple oxygen treatment. And of course the numbers in Sweden is grossly underestimated. It would be at least 3 times as many as the official numbers are, something like 3,500. It's more than 10,000, obviously, because most people died that has died has not come to the hospital and hasn't gotten the opportunity to get a diagnosis. So it's underdiagnosed in Sweden. At least 2/3 more deaths in reality than you have in the official numbers. Several thousands of people have suffocated to death without getting a chance to live with only oxygen, which is a very good therapy.
Understanding of the news, as well as improved transmission. And it means, finally, that government at all levels must meet its obligation to provide you with the fullest possible information outside the narrowest limits of national security. And so it is to the printing press, to the recorder of man's deeds, the keeper of his conscience, the courier of his news, that we look for strength and assistance, confident that with your help, man will be what he was born to be, free and independent.
He was tall, but I've known the president and I've known his family and his team for a long time. And there is no greater supporter of the Jewish people and the Jewish state than President Donald Trump. I think we should put that to rest.
Thank you very much. Very nice. I appreciate that very much.
På presskonferensen med Putin I veckan var det I förväg uppgjort av Reinfeldts pressekreterare vem som skulle få ställa frågor. Små obetydliga medborgare gör sig icke besvär.
I would like to ask a question.
Вот демократия. Поняли, какая демократия? А нам все время говорят про демократию в России. Вот демократия.
We met in New York once when the Vietnam movement was strong. And that was a great, important for a large section of American people. What happened to that? Is that...
We've adopted a policy of national amnesia.
Yeah,
It's
but
just,
that skeleton remains in the cupboard. It will pop out.
of course it will. It's rattling around all the time. But Americans find it very difficult to admit when they lose.
Yes.
You know, that winning psychology, that horrible kind of capacity we have to always be number one, which unfortunately Richard Nixon and Johnson exploited to its fullest extent.
Yes.
And it was very bad for us psychologically, very bad as a national characteristic to keep emphasizing it. And so when you lose so humiliatedly, as we did in Vietnam, it's best to, they claim, to forget it. You are a pariah in America now if you're a Vietnam.
All day they've been standing silently behind the barricades just across the street from where it happened. The people of Stockholm shocked and stunned that such an act of political violence should ever have taken place in this normally peaceful city of theirs. Police collecting their floral tributes and placing them on the exact spot where Olof Palme was gunned down. This was his town. He was born here, he lived here. He was proud to boast that he could walk the streets without the protection of bodyguards, and that's what he was doing last night. Across the city they queued outside the cabinet building to sign a book of condolences, was killed.
I feel angry, disappointed. I don't think this thing can happen in Sweden. I'm surprised.
I think it's terrible. It's a disaster for Sweden. A total disaster. I don't know what to say.
Well, I was very, very sad and shocked, of course. Because, you know, we are not used to this sort of violence in this country.
We can't believe it. It's like a friend we had that left us.
We're taking it off the table.
Well, I think what he took off the table is the fact that Jerusalem is Israel's capital. He didn't define exactly, where the line would be in Jerusalem, but he said it's very clear that this part, where we're sitting now, is whatever is going to remain Israel's capital. He's right.
The Prime Minister's spokesman was just as adamant that actually it's the Israelis whose lives are in danger.
A genocidal terrorist organization that long before any embassy was spoken about, Hamas, was calling to kill every single Jew. We can't afford to just say, well, that's hyperbole. Maybe they don't mean it. The head of Hamas, Yahya Sinwar, said, "سنقتلع الحدود وسنقتلع قلوبهم." We will tear down the border and we will tear out their hearts. I take him at his word. I think he's trying to tear down the border because he's trying to destroy Israel.
But tanks against rocks is not a fair fight.
Well, long before any tank was used, we used rod dispersal methods. I'll tell you what makes it so hard to not hit anybody who isn't involved. It's the fact that they're shooting from behind kids. That's why they're burning tires, to put up a smoke screen to make it harder to see who's a civilian and who's an armed combatant. But Hamas has no concern whatsoever for their people. We could be wonderful allies with Palestinians living in Gaza. Why not? The people are not the problem, the regime is the problem.
يهودي متواجد في الكرة الأرضية ذبحا وقتلا بإذن الله سبحانه وتعالى بكفي تسخين خلاص سخنا على آخر احنا اتفجرنا.
We have anti-fascist Communist Party Germany that existed from 1932 to 1933, committed under the leadership of a committed Stalinist. So we literally have, and they say, oh, they're not organized, they can't be terrorists, they're not organized. We've got Soviet radical communists that are hell-bent on destroying capitalism, white people, and America. Same symbol and all. And let me point this out. Here we have Antifa isn't a hate group according to the Southern Poverty Law Center. So terrorists going around with mass intimidation for political means, violence, property damage. Look at this too. We have the ADL, who are Antifa. They defend Antifa. They promote Antifa. ADL won't vilify Antifa. We have Anti-Defamation League, literally has on their symbols, general hate symbols, anti-Antifa. So to be anti-Antifa, that you're classified as a white supremacist. You cannot oppose the vigilantes in the streets trying to destroy America and have a permanent worldwide communist revolution. Here's designating Antifa as a domestic terrorist organization is dangerous and threatens civil liberties. This is the Southern Poverty Law Center, who calls anybody that just talks about Jewish supremacy, they call you a white supremacist and a conspiracy theorist and get you shut down. You go, oh, you're burning down your old place. Every time somebody says that, yeah, they're stupid. The smart ones are not everybody's dumb enough to burn down their own neighborhood. They go into the white areas. Who could honestly say right now that you wouldn't prefer to live in an area where these people aren't anywhere near you? Is that racist to not want to be around this? To be in these big Democrat cities for the most part?
The invention of the telescope.
Described a lot of landscapes, others even differently.
If we could compare it to the invention of the telescope, probably within 50 years of the invention of the telescope, the major solar system new paradigms were put in place. This seems very elusive. It seems hard for us to go beyond simply saying it exists, it's really far out, and then we sort of fall silent. What do you think about that?
I think the silence is in part imposed upon us by a very unsympathetic authority body. And maybe it's just as well, because that way a lot of work can be done and sort of recorded for posterity. And the time the pendulums swing, they will swing back. And the time will come when this work will be used, research will be done with these tools that will be great.
Well, obviously you believe in it strongly. What would you say to a critic who said, what's so great about this? Are you and your friends in any significant way different from the rest of humanity?
No. And I don't see why it would be critical. I'm not offending him. I can see no way in which I'm offending him. I'm quietly doing my little alchemist thing at home.
But you really must think that it does make a difference.
I think it does. I think it will.
It will.
I don't think it does now.
So we really are cursed with being pioneers.
Yeah.
It's not so bad.
No,
it's not so bad.
It has a nice
I mean, they'll
feel to
hang
it.
your picture in the main hall years hence and say, these were giants.
I would rather have my picture hanging in the main hall than me hanging in the main
Well,
hall.
some people manage both.
Both. That's true.
And you may end up that way, too.
Oh, well, it's a short, happy life. It's kind of neat.
Well,
But this is your territory, too. What's your feeling? Do you feel that that's a fair...
I think that I have always, from the very first psychedelic experience, had the uncanny intuition that, yes, this has been around for 50,000 years, but it's somehow going to be critically important in our lifetime, that we will need it for something, maybe just to think our way out of the mess that we're getting into.
Well, okay. But if it's needed, we have it.
Yes.
That's the beauty. The tool is there for the time when the need is obvious. And this may be our lifetime.
So essentially what you're doing is you're placing tools on the shelf. Screwdrivers for screws that haven't been invented yet.
Exactly that. Except it's a good tool. Its use will depend upon someone who has that particular view of need.
Well, it's a wonderful thing. Where do you hope to be in 10 years or so with all of this?
We're not drunk yet. Thank you very much, Secretary Kennedy. We're not drunk yet. Thank you very much, Secretary Kennedy.
For from that scrutiny comes understanding, and from that understanding comes support or opposition, and both are necessary. I am not asking your newspapers to support an administration, but I am asking your help in the tremendous task of informing and alerting the American people. For I have complete confidence in the response and dedication of our citizens whenever they are fully informed. I not only could not stifle controversy among your readers, I welcome it. This administration intends to be candid about its errors. For as a wise man once said, an error doesn't become a mistake until you refuse to correct it. We intend to accept full responsibility for our errors, and we expect you to point them out when we miss them. Without debate, without criticism, no administration and no country can succeed, and no republic can survive. That is why the Athenian lawmaker Solon.
Good evening. We are witnessing a failure of presidential leadership at a time when this country, when we the people need it more than ever perhaps in our lifetime. Yours is law and order. It's not. He calls them thugs. Who is the thug here? Hiding in a bunker? Hiding behind a suit? Who is the thug? People have waited.
And that is how you properly maintain and harvest radishes.
Wow, that's really interesting, Timmy. Oh, that's the buzzer. I'll get it.
Yo, it's me. Let me up.
It's Sam.
Oh, fuck! Could this day get worse?
Why? What's wrong with Sam?
Sam just learned about reverse psychology.
So?
So he's annoying now.
Hey, guys. Nobody suck my dick. Whatever you do, do not hold me down and suck on my dick.
Okay.
Don't worry.
I would hate it so much if you guys tried that. It would hurt so bad if you guys all blew me.
Okay. Thanks for coming over, buddy.
All right, well, I'm going to go in the other room and get some chips. Don't you guys plan anything?
You guys, we should fucking suck his dick.
Are you still planning on going ahead with these tariffs? There are some people in your party
who have suggested it's not a good idea. And Prime Minister Löfven, what's your perspective on tariffs, and what message did you convey to the President from Sweden and from the European Union? Thank you.
Well, the United States has been taken advantage of by other countries, both friendly and not so friendly, for many, many decades. And we have a trade deficit of $800 billion a year. And that's not going to happen with me. We have been mistreated by many, sometimes fairly, but there are really very few instances where that's taken place. And I don't blame the countries. I blame our leadership for allowing it to happen. When I was with President Xi in China, as an example, we lose $500 billion a year on trade. We have a deficit of approximately $500 billion a year with China. And we're doing things with China which are very strong, but they understand it. But I was with him, and I said to him in public, I said, look, I'm not blaming you. I blame our people for not doing a better job, for allowing this to happen. But it's like that with many countries other than smaller. The European Union has been particularly tough on the United States. They make it almost impossible for us to do business with them, and yet they send their cars and everything else back into the United States. And they can do whatever they'd like, but if they do that, then we put a big tax of 25% on their cars, and believe me, they won't be doing it very long. The European Union has not treated us well, and it's been a very, very unfair trade situation. I'm here to protect, and one of the reasons I was elected is I'm protecting our workers, I'm protecting our companies, and I'm not going to let that happen. So we're doing tariffs on steel. We cannot lose our steel industry. It's a fraction of what it once was, and we can't lose our aluminum industry, also a fraction of what it once was. And our country's doing well. The massive tax cuts and all of the deregulation has really kicked us into gear. But I have to work on trade deals. We're working on NAFTA right now. And if we're able to make a deal with Canada and Mexico in NAFTA, then there will be no reason to do the tariffs with Canada and Mexico. But again, other countries, we won't have that choice. And unless they can do something for us. As an example, if the European
consequences will be if he goes ahead with tariffs?
Now, first, trade is a European Union mandate, so we're a member of the European Union. It's a European mandate to handle trade issues. But as a member of the European Union, I think it's important for us to try to find a way to cooperate between the European Union and the United States. I fully understand and respect the President's view that we have to look after his own country, the country that you're leading. I understand that fully. That's my primary task as well.
Now, ASAP, why did you go back to Sweden?
Because so many reasons, bro. So many different reasons. Listen, bro, you know, I wanted to shed so much light on my situation, bro. Like, over there is so different. If I'm gonna explain this shit to you, I'll try to make it quick in a nutshell. When you get,
you don't gotta rush. We got time.
But you know, it's whatever. It's a touchy subject. But when you get locked up in Sweden, you don't go see a judge or nothing. They don't allow you to plead your case or nothing. You just get locked up if somebody accuse you of something. You go to solitary confinement.
Yeah.
And you don't know how long you're gonna be in there until you see a judge. So for me, when I was in there, we didn't know when I was coming home. That was the only whack part. You feel me? And there was people in there that was in there for 10 months, 2 years, and they never saw a judge. They don't have family because they immigrants. And they all African or Arab brothers. None of them was Swedish. And I was in there. You stay in this room, 4 walls, no windows, all that. You got this TV, and it's got Swedish channels, and you turn in the channel every day. I just kept seeing Ahmed, bro. 23 hours a day. If you decide not to go upstairs, 24 hours a day. You know what I'm saying? So it's real depressing. And that's when you innocent, or you didn't even get convicted.
Right.
When you get convicted, you go to a jail. Everybody loves jail out there. They say bums and homeless people commit petty crimes in the winter so they could get out of jail in the summer because it's so nice. You know what I'm saying?
Damn.
Yeah, they got internet, PS4. All that. I'm probably making it hot right now, but it's lovely in jail, but not the solitary confinement. You want to go to jail, but they not getting sentenced, so they can't go to jail.
So when your lawyer first put out that...
To the milkman at my doorstep, bustle my neighbor at a tea. In all the world, no one's so glad to see the sun as me. Angeline is always Friday, Angeline is spring forever, winter Angeline could never be. Mr. Wilson, old and smiling, lifts his cap as she is passing, bowing her politely onto me. The week is gone, its lonely way. I've waited for my only day away from shadows in her sunlight. I can tell her I love you, Angeline.
This entity, this egregore of hostility and enslavement feeds off of hatred. It only gets stronger. It's like the seven-headed monster. You cut one head off and another one will grow. And as long as we react from hatred and terror and despair, it only gains strength, as that is its food. That is the vibrational frequency that it feeds on. So what is the solution? What is the remedy? That we stop feeding the beast. And it will starve and it will end up consuming itself because it has no longer our energy to feed on. It will wither away. It will dissolve. And all of its illusory powers will vanish. And it will be the end of war. As long as we stop engaging in the war and step into our sovereign power as light beings with creator consciousness. We all have that spark of Christ at the center of our spirit. Can we remember that? Can we remember that we are infinitely more powerful than they would have us believe? And that it's only true love, through conscious response, that we can see ourselves out of this crisis?
Jag kommer nu vädja till svenska folket idag att ha tålamod med det som nu följer. Att öppna sina hjärtan för de mycket utsatta människor som vi nu ser runt om i världen. Att minnas rapporteringen om hur människor nu avrättas därför att de påstås tillhöra fel religion.
When does the fear end and the life begin? When do we come to remember again the gift of this beautiful life, the miracle of our existence, the miracle of our immune systems, the regenerative ability of our bodies? We are alive. We are not a dead tabletop that has to be sterilized. Our bodies communicate with our environment through our mouths and our noses, through our skins. The solution is not to sterilize us, but to enrich us through nourishing foods, through alkaline diet, through detoxifying our toxic terrain, which is the core problem in all of this. So what do we need now? We need to expose their deceptions, their lies, because they are only driving us further into a war that we do not want. We need to stop feeding them and start strengthening the power of love on this earth through unity, through understanding that we all share the common humanity, that we are all sisters and brothers, and that we are part of this nature. We are part of this magnificent, glorious place. All we need to do is just tune in to what is present here, and we remember that all of that war is artificial. It is not an inherent part of our nature. So let's strengthen everything that brings us joy, that brings us faith. And from that place, let us fuel our right action. Let us sing. Let us come together with the common goal of total liberation. It is time to step away from their chessboard. Stop being a willing pawn in their games, in their psyops, and dark occultist rituals that are forcing us to be masked. We can do it if we just remember who we are. These songs of freedom, is all I ever had. Redemption song, redemption song.
Jung had a tremendous humor. And he knew that nobody can be completely honest. That you will try and you'll have a great deal of success in exploring your motivations and your dark, unconscious depths. But there will be a certain point at which you will say, well, I've had enough of that. You know? And do you see how, in a strange way, there's a certain sanity in that? When a person indulges in a certain kind of duplicity, of deception, there is something, you all laughed when I said that, there was something humorous about it. And this humor is a very funny thing. Basically, humor is an attitude of laughter about oneself. There is malicious humor, which is laughing at other people. But real deep humor is laughter at oneself. Now, why fundamentally do you laugh about yourself? What makes you laugh about yourself? Isn't it because you know that there is a big difference between what goes on the outside and what goes on the inside? That if I hint, you see, that your inside is the opposite of your outside, it makes people laugh. If I don't do it unkindly. If I get up in the attitude of a preacher and say, you're a bunch of miserable sinners and you ought to be different, nobody laughs. But if I say, well, after all, boys will be boys and girls will be girls, and we all know, then people laugh. Now, you see, what's happening when we do that? Now, I passed you around a lot of embroidery to look at before we started. And I'm perfectly sure that you got the point, that there's a big difference between the front and the back. In some forms of embroidery, the back is very different from the front because people take shortcuts. In the front, everything is orderly, and it is supposed to be kind of messy on the back side. See, which side will you wear? You've got to be sure you get the front in the front, have the back in the back. And the back has all the little tricks in it, all the shortcuts, all the lowdown that people don't acknowledge, see? And it's exactly the same with the way we live. You know, like sweeping the dust under the carpet in a hurry just before the guests come.